3 minutes after 10 is the time. A very good morning indeed to you. It's a lovely day. Do you want to know a secret? Can I tell you this? Should I tell you this? Is it a trade secret? I think you've probably worked it out for yourself. In fact, I probably tell you every year and then promptly forget. But for radio phone-in hosts, August is the cruelest month, not April. August is the cruelest month because so many people are on holiday, including, of course, the House of Commons, that they're on holiday for a long time, that the news cycle, such as it is, well, not even that, the sort of conveyor belt of conversation, that's my darts name, that is, the conveyor belt of conversation dries up a bit. And you have to cast around, especially if you are not minded to do endless conversations about low emission zones and parking tickets and the like. You have to cast around a little further for your nourishment, for your topics. And today I've happened upon one that we should actually have done sooner. And the reason why I mentioned that it's slightly slim pickings at the moment in terms of substantive stories is because I'm coming at this very, very, very personally. Neither professionally nor particularly politically, actually. It's almost a tongue twister, that, isn't it? And I want you to do the same. I really do want you to do the same. So I don't know. I can never presume that you know a great deal about this programme or this presenter, but I have been, over the years, a fairly tireless critic of Brexit for reasons that I don't even think need detailing anymore. There was a period when people thought I was wrong or that it was going to go well or that all of the warnings about what would happen to our economy or what would happen to people hoping to live or work in Europe or what would happen to the price of food or what would happen to, you name it, really. Not necessarily caused by voting to become the first population in history to impose economic sanctions on itself or falling for the lies of people like Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson. They're not caused necessarily, but anything bad is worse and anything good is less good, pretty much as a consequence of that ludicrous decision. So I mention that solely to establish my credentials for having the conversation that we are about to have, because you might expect me to feel upbeat or vindicated or even perhaps excited about the speed with which opinions appear to be changing. Perhaps the most interesting element of the most recent YouGov survey was the finding that 1 in 5 Leave voters now want to rejoin. And of course that would probably involve a second referendum, unless the numbers get so high. Do you know what? That's not impossible. So it gets up to about 80 or 90% in the polling. I wonder if a government would have the cojones to push it over the line. But of course, we're not going to get there. I mean the government, not the numbers. For, hundreds of years. And this is the point at which I find myself none of the things that I just suggested I might be. I'm not excited by this news. I'm certainly not vindicated by it. And neither am I particularly encouraged or enthused by it. Because I genuinely think that it is a waste of energy. And I know I've got a lot of friends, a lot of listeners, possibly even a lot of admirers who will be part of the Rejoin March. There's a 24-point gap in almost all the polling now on the question of whether or not we should rejoin the European Union. And there is a march taking place in London next month that will seek to marshal that part of the population. It's on Saturday, the 23rd of September. It's kicking off in Hyde Park. It'll go past Downing Street and it will finish for a rally in Parliament Square. I've got no idea what the numbers will be like. And I haven't been asked to speak yet, but I probably will be. And I don't know that I can because I'm not feeling it. And I think perhaps I thought I would be. Quick shout to all my Scottish listeners, parents and children who start back today for the new school term. Good luck to you. Don't forget you can listen to the show on Catch Up after school, kids. You can go download it from Global Player and listen on Catch Up, where you can rewind live radio and find all you know the rest. So why? I can't ask why I'm not. I can't ask you why I'm not feeling it, can I? Well, maybe I can actually. But why is it not, given that the numbers are now moving in precisely the direction we always knew they would move, and given that the hardier souls than mine are organising and indeed marching, and even the corners of the country, I think I saw support for it on one of them at 30%. And you look at that and you think, yeah, right. That is either people who've got gammon for brains or people who just can't ever climb down. I used to be one of those people who could never admit he was wrong. So I do understand what that is like. But you can't. I mean, there's literally nothing you can look at the moment and think, oh, I'm glad we did that because of this. Jacob Rees-Mogg, probably the funniest contributor to this part of the pageant, as ever. Cheap food, he said. You get cheap food. Incredible. So what's going on? What's going on? 9 minutes after 10 is the time. Is it a waste of energy to mobilise on the prospect of rejoining the European Union? That is really what I want you to tell me. And I want you to come at it from whatever angle you like, but it is at least personal plus political. I don't understand why I am not. Maybe I am going to be a bit self-indulgent actually this morning. Maybe it's because we've got so used to losing everything. If you're on the sort of progressive or decent side of political battles, I suppose Joe Biden won in America, but he's not the most inspirational candidate you've ever seen. He's no Barack Obama, is he? But you've lost referendums, you've lost general elections, you've sat back and seen both major parties offer up the most appalling of Hobson's choices in 2019. You sort of, maybe that's it. Maybe you just don't think good things happen anymore to this country, to a country where, you know, people who have been disciplined, criticised by Parliament for riding roughshod over our own parliamentary democracy get rewarded with columns in the Daily Mail and programmes on weird new television stations that don't make any profit, that hemorrhage money, but exist solely that the owners can continue to influence public discourse. The country is completely crackers now. Yeah, you know, the think tanks getting their claws into every corner of government and media without ever telling you who works, who pays their wages. Media cheerleading for the most disgraceful and disgraced Prime Minister in history. The fact that Johnson can get chucked out of Downing Street and then run away from the House of Commons rather than face proper scrutiny of his own actions. And not only have a bunch of weasels queuing up to claim that it's been some sort of witch hunt or kangaroo court, but also get rewarded with a column in a newspaper. Newspapers traditionally the last chance that the population of a country has to hold politicians, hold power to account. Can you imagine that? Can you even conceive of living in a country where the media holds power to account? Media in this country has been tickling the toes of some of the most ridiculous and depraved politicians we've ever had the misfortune of enduring. And yet they turn up in studios to have their tummies tickled by client journalists, or they pop up in newspapers with their own columns despite having been thrown out in disgrace. It's mad, right? I may have come pretty much to the end of writing my new book. You may be able to detect some of the themes that emerge in it and possibly even a slight bounce in my demeanour this morning. And of course, both a major cause and an enormous symptom of the malaise that I describe, of the rot that has set in to this country, some of it deliberate, some of it accidental, was the successful campaign of lies and misinformation in 2016 that persuaded just enough people that if they voted to leave the European Union, they would be better off. The NHS would improve, there would be shorter waiting lists, there would be cheaper food, there would be cheaper energy, there would be, if you are a bit racist, fewer immigrants, there would be, you name it, it was going to happen. None of it has, which is why we know the 30% who claim they're still glad they did it are lying to themselves. But with all of that in place, I currently, and I'd love to hit 11 o'clock today, Alec, I'm just looking at your text, I'd love to hit 11 o'clock today with a little bit more lead in my pencil. He says, please don't talk the movement down. We need people like you behind us or we will be doomed to stay out of Europe forever. I hope you will be with us at the march in September. So do I. I hope I have a slight change. It's not a permanent position, Alec. I just don't see the point at this point. My personal perspective, and I've given it quite a lot of thought this morning, is too soon, lads. It's not going to... I don't care what the numbers are doing. The political landscape, not least because Keir Starmer, the prince of pragmatism, refuses even to go there. Not even. I mean, he's not just not going there, he's running away from going there. He's actively putting space between him and any prospect of coming out in support of rejoining. Just for the record, he is talking twaddle when he bigs up the notion of being able to improve our relationship. The only way you improve your relationship with the European Union is regulatory alignment, legislated regulatory alignment. And the only way, if you have regulatory alignment, you're in it. You're subject to all the rules and regulations designed to protect workers and uphold health and safety and other standards, all the things that Jacob and his mates were desperate to set fire to. And if you're doing that, then you have literally become a rule taker, not a rule maker. Brexit eventually will turn the United Kingdom into all the things that Brexiters lied about it being in order to get votes. That's the ultimate irony of Brexit. So I can see the reasons in an objective universe, in a logical space, should have a referendum tomorrow to do it. But I just don't think it's going to happen. And therefore, I don't really see the point at the moment in... I'll tell you what, I mean, I was about to say I don't see the point in pushing for rejoin. I don't see the point in marching for rejoin. Here's an interesting thing we can add to our conversation. I don't see the point in polling. I bet that surprises you. Every poll on Brexit is effectively a pat on the back for me and many of you. Every poll on Brexit is an I told you so moment. Every poll on Brexit is Keith, get the tin. Every poll on Brexit is completely ignored by all the people in my line of work who told you to support it because they are too cowardly and shameful to own their own error. If you do a job like this and you lead the country towards this sort of catastrophe, you need to have very, very, very thick skin, I think, not to reflect upon the betrayal you've undertaken of your own listeners and readers and viewers. But I still don't see it. I still don't feel it. The appetite is there, but it's not reflected in our politics, certainly not in public. I think Sadiq Khan is the only politician who's really put his head above the parapet, apart from the Liberal Democrats who, for reasons, continue to fail to draw the sort of attention that many feel they deserve, myself included. I think a more multiple, a more varied political choice is good for democracy, good for the country. But there it is. So what do you think about this energy that's been expended on calling for rejoin? Am I swimming against the tide? Am I being a misery guy? Am I suffering from a dose of the Meldrews? 0345 606 0973. Or perhaps, do you agree with me that although it's obvious that we should do, the politics of this country, the people of this country have been so completely corrupted by deceitful, disgusting, depraved politicians and journalists that it's not going to happen for years? Or can you bring some optimism? Can you be the sunbeam on the programme today? Can you shine some joy, some enthusiasm, some optimism into the mix? I'm not going to stop condemning it, Jeff. Don't worry about that. He says if you stop condemning it, the Brexiters have won. They've already won, mate. They just haven't won anything. That's the beauty of these conversations. Is So they've gone from saying, I'm drinking your tears, to saying, please stop talking about it. Show me a Brexiter who's even close to having an IQ in double figures, and I'll show you someone who now insists that everybody else stops talking about it. It's as if in 1967 they all started running around saying, let's never mention the World Cup again. Could you imagine that happening? Speaking of which, kick-off in 43 minutes. So Jeff makes a good point. John the Baptist cried alone in the wilderness because he was right. Are you comparing me to John the Baptist, Jeff? After we joined the EU in the 70s, Leave campaign supporters agitated for decades. They never shut up, so why should we? And that is the perfect counterbalance to what it took me the best part of 16 minutes to say. Thank goodness Jeff in Hounslow is rather more brief in his articulations than I am. Should we get the phone lines open? 0345 606 0973. Have I got this one wrong? Or is the whole rejoin cause Too much, too soon. It is 21 minutes after 10. Laura in Renfrew points out that there will be a significant number of people listening to this programme today who would welcome a moratorium, a permanent moratorium on mentioning 1966 when England, of course, won the World Cup. I take your point, Laura, but the fact that Brexiters don't like to talk about Brexit anymore is illustrative of movements that also deliver numbers like this. 59% think it was wrong to leave, according to an Omnisys poll, just 41% that it was right. 62% of respondents now want to rejoin the EU, with 38% of those who gave definitive answers, these are the numbers you get when you filter out the don't knows, believe that keeping our current status quo is the right thing to do. I mean, what are their brains made of, truly? And yet today we are talking about the potential futility of currently calling for rejoin. It is 22 minutes after 10. Sam's in Canterbury. Sam, what do you reckon?
Yeah, hi there, James. So I guess I essentially want to agree with you, actually. I was an avid Remainer, voted to remain, but I just don't believe, despite the obvious benefits of being a member of the EU, I don't believe that, A, we've given it enough time to make it work.
It's okay, carry on.
And B, I don't believe, A, we've given it enough time to make it work, and B, we have to explore.
There is no B. There is no B.
Well, no, there is a B. We have to explore the opportunities that are available. But that's the same as saying we haven't given it enough time to make it work. It isn't worth expending time and capital and political resources and will.
Yeah, that bit I might agree with, but it depends, doesn't it? I mean, with respect, you're clearly not fully aware of the damage that we've done and the damage that we continue to do. And as with Brexit, of course, as with the referendum vote, most people won't be, because the organs and the individuals that we rely upon for trustworthy information are still signed up to the con. So if you find 30% of people claiming it was still the right thing to do, 100% of commentators and politicians who backed it are in that category. That's a really weird corruption. But how bad would it have to get, I guess, before you felt that it's time to start bouncing back? I agree with you, I think, about the expending of energy and political capital and political will, but with respect, our businesses haven't gone bust, have they? Or we're not struggling to find staff, or I don't know what your personal circumstances are, but you know, not
at all.
We're not in the coalface of the pain that's been caused. We haven't had to move back to Britain from Spain because we can't stay there for more than 90 days in every 180.
Yeah, agreed. But equally, I don't necessarily think rejoining the EU, which, by the way, I reassert, I wish we'd never left. I don't equally think rejoining the EU makes Britain the land of milk and honey again. There were huge problems in this country caused by successive governments.
Yes, but none of them were caused by EU membership, were they? That's the point. So I hear what you're saying, but I'm not persuaded by some of your reasoning that the idea of having putting another 10pence in Farage's slot. Imagine him bouncing around all over the place, spewing his bile and unveiling his Nazi posters and all that. I'd have. But you know, these are scales, and the prize of becoming a civilized, outward-looking 21st century nation again versus the pain of having to endure a pound shop Enoch Powell jumping up and down like a rancid Duracell bunny. I guess you would, depending on your perspective, see one as massively outweighing the other. But I don't want to... Nicky's suggesting that Sam may have sounded a little bit like someone pretending to be a Remainer. Nicky, I think that's a brutal analysis. But I do genuinely think that you're barking at the moon if you think anything's going to shift on this in the foreseeable future. But I'd love to be persuaded that I'm wrong. Richard's in Brighton. Richard, what would you like to say?
Hello, good morning, James.
Hello, Richard.
Long time listener, first time caller.
There it is. Ding, 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 ding.
I'm glad you plugged the march. I'm an avid Remainer. I went on all the I campaigned before the referendum. I went on all the marches. I did all the political stuff after it because, like you, I thought the whole thing was a fraud and a deceit and a con and all that. I think I do intend to go on the march. I think it should be kept. Yeah, I think it should be kept on the political agenda.
On a simmer, on a rolling simmer.
On the back burner.
On the back burner. Yes, I think I agree with that.
But this is the but. Anyone who thinks that all we need to do is get in a Labour government next time, apply to join the EU, and it will all be as before is deluded. And I know that's not what you think, but I think a lot of people do think, we'll have another referendum.
I think it would be a little easier than for countries that have never been in it before. I also think that the optics would encourage the Commission to make it a little bit easier than it might otherwise be, because it's wonderful for the European Union to have us coming back, and as long as no one tries to portray us as having our tail between our legs, and we can't be certain of that. But you're right, because you're looking at Schengen, you're looking at single currency. These are pledges to approach those positions are now prerequisites of joining. What about EFTA? What about, just sort of quietly slipping into EFTA, which is, of course, membership without influence?
That would be, I think it's the European Economic Area, so that would be with Norway and Iceland and Switzerland. It's going to be, this is what I think. I think when, hopefully, Labour get in next time, it's going to be, whenever the Tories are in for the foreseeable, it's going to be, let's have trade deals with other countries. Labour is going to say, look, we need to sort out our relationship with Europe. It's going to be gradual.
But it's never going to be frictionless unless there's regulatory alignment. Even George Eustice has come out against or critical of that Australia trade deal that when he was in government he had to pretend was brilliant. Liz Truss essentially became Prime Minister off the back of pretending that rubbish deals were somehow Brexit benefit.
Well, it sold out British farmers.
Right down the river. But the sense of the scale of the project of rejoining, and plus I don't know, maybe that's us. But not you, Richard. Just you're going to be there. I probably will be there. I get treated like a rock star at those things. Even my vanity and my ego will probably make sure that I go there. But I don't at the moment. I like Richard's analogy of a simmer. Just keep back burner, he said, didn't it? Keep it on the back burner. I don't think you're going to move any mountains anytime soon. Nicholas is in Glasgow. Nicholas, what made you pick up the phone?
I'm picking up the phone, James, to speak to a tired John the Baptist. That's how I consider your situation.
Tired John the Baptist.
Yes, I think effectively you've been doing remarkable work, but effectively the best intention in the world, you get tired, you get dissuaded.
Yes.
My contention was I voted to leave, and I believe now I was a fool. I was hoodwinked, and effectively since that time, when I think of my children and my grandchildren, I fear for them with the situation as it stands. Another aspect that's important, not necessarily the match or a vote, it's the beginning of an awakening of people to realise they've been duped, and severely and positively duped. And the position would be that I consider my children and my grandchildren will be angry at the fact that we, the older generation, have let them down. We have betrayed them. We've listened to nonsenses. And equally so, another side aspect is, look at the mark of the right wing in Europe now that Britain has left, because it was a steady influence in the democracy.
Maybe. I think that's you couldn't prove that, could you? Sort of epistemologically, but it's epistemologically, but it is.
James, where did these words come? Have you got a dictation?
I have a small piece of thesaurus for breakfast every morning.
Right.
But I also, actually, if I was in a punchier mood, I'd push back against that and say that we think that Europe is got a problem with fringe far-right parties increasing their popularity. I think we've got something pretty close to a far-right party in power. Certainly elements of it. You look at Braverman and people like that.
Certainly.
I don't know whether we get to say if we were there, if only we were there, then the fascists in Italy and Poland and places like that they'd be scurrying away. I don't think that quite works anymore.
I can understand your frustration when you have these things happening, and we're reading about Nigel Farage's bank account. God
Big news that. How dare you?
Where's common sense gone?
Big news that. Massive story. They changed the name of the bank on his card. And the world stopped. Here's a question for you. I'm not entirely comfortable with this line of conversation, but it's out there now, and you're running with it. If I'm John the Baptist, who the hell is Jesus?
Going to save, hopefully, a lot of us at the end of the day, and I'm just a normal person, I'm not a religious fanatic. Hopefully there's common sense. Hopefully. And it's important you don't lose your energy in pursuing matters.
Well, you're very kind. I'm never going to stop pointing out the error of leaving, but enthusing about the prospect of rejoining is as you recognise, a slightly different proposition, but maybe we are all a bit suffering from fatigue. Steve suggests that from little acorns do mighty oaks grow, and that's why back burner and said. But I don't know. Anyway, it's in a sense the idea of hitting the road on the 23rd of September is focusing my thoughts at least as much as the surprising surge in support for the idea of rejoining. I thought it would take a little bit longer. It's 10:31. Thomas Watts has your headlines. 10:34 is the time. Is it a waste of energy? The calls, even with the numbers supporting the notion that the population is behind the idea, the prospect of rejoining the European Union is too far over the horizon to merit the expending of expense and energy and hope. That's the thing, isn't it? It's the hope that gets you. The despair you can deal with. Maybe that's it, actually. I've used that quote a million times, haven't I? It comes from Clockwise, the John Cleese film. I think Michael Frayn wrote the script, and it's a beautiful line. It's the hope that gets you. All sports fans will be aware of this. I can deal with the despair. It's the hope that gets you. Maybe that's what it is for me. I'm turning that down because disappointment is so draining. And I think there's logic there as well, not just emotion. I just can't see it happening anytime soon. Sliding back into EFTA without making a big fuss about it and hoping that everybody else is too busy shouting at boats to notice, that could work, but I don't know. Anyway, on we go. 10:35 is the time. Lee's in Sunderland. Lee, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. I just don't think there's any chance of us returning in any sort of form in the near future. You'll know better than me the rules to join the EU, taking the euro. We'd have to join on worse grounds than what we left. We'd have no veto unless they come out and said, you can have everything you had before, come back, we'll forget all about it. And that's not going to happen, is it?
No, but you're doing it binary. You're right. I don't think you have to. I think you have to commit to joining the euro or Schengen. I don't think the day you join, you sign up to that. And a good negotiator might be able to get dispensations, but now I sound like a Brexiter saying they need us more than we need them. So it's funny how the pendulum swings. But you're doing you're comparing two things, because even a diluted membership would be better than what we've got now. It's just that's a different thing to sell perhaps to the public than a straight comparison of the two situations.
Yeah, I just don't see it ever coming off in any way unless they could just say, and then how would that affect other countries trying to join the EU if they said you can just have everything you had before, come back, let's forget all about it and let's move on again. I voted to remain because I just thought it was the best thing. I looked at the options and I just thought the long term, even though I'm not a big lover of the EU, I don't think it's all that holy that you seem to find it is.
No, not at all. It's a flawed institution, but if you give me the choice between Nigel Farage and almost anything, Boris Johnson and almost anything, whatever they say, the high likelihood is that the polar opposite is true. But no one thinks the EU is perfect. It's just that trading with the people on your doorstep without any friction or inspection or anything, freedom of movement. It's a no-brainer, mate. So you mustn't fall into the trap of thinking that people who understand the issues are passionate, blind advocates of the European Union. It's sclerotic. It's top-heavy. It's a democratic institution, so it has all the flaws of that as well.
I went there a few years ago to Brussels and we went round the European Union. We just saw everyone sat. Give it its dues. It was at lunchtime. Everyone sat outside, lovely day, bottles of wine in their flash suits. I thought, God, this is where all our money goes. Yeah. But that's just an instant of seeing that glimpse of the Brussels. But I haven't felt this massive fall off the cliff like you feel. It's never really affected us. Nothing's really changed for me. My wife's a nurse. And she's struggling a little bit with staffing and.
Well, that is a consequence of Brexit.
Yeah,
so you say nothing's really affected you, but your wife's job has got measurably worse, mate.
She's going to retire next year. She wasn't planning to retire. She's going to be 55 next year. And she said she's had enough now.
So she said it hasn't affected your life at all, and yet your wife is retiring early, partly as a consequence of turning off freedom of movement.
Possibly.
It's not possibly. It's definitely.
Yeah.
That's the biggest reason for the demoralising state of the NHS. That and the wages and of course it'd be easier to pay higher wages if we were trading better with The largest single market on the planet. But I know I do. The problem is everyone who's agreeing with me, I'm disagreeing with their reasons for agreeing with me. So that's got an agreeably Brexity flavour. Liz is in Cricklade. Liz, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Well, I'm actually speaking at the March. I'm delighted to speak at the March as the founder of Save British Farming and a farmer. It's about food, really, and it always was about food.
Yes.
Brexit, and it's urgent. Everybody who's going, feeling the pinch of the cost of living should be there screaming to rejoin. We have to rejoin.
How do you make that connection? How do you make that? You heard the last caller. He's paying more for his food than he ever has before, but he is under the impression that Brexit hasn't affected him at all. How do you make that connection?
Well, I don't know how he's made the connection that he's made. I know absolutely what's going on with food and farming here, that food production in Britain is falling off a cliff. It's being destroyed, which means we're more reliant on imports. Being more reliant on imports means that we have absolutely no control over prices. It doesn't matter what they do to interest rates. We've got no control whatsoever. And you're on a hostage to a fortune on world markets. It also means that food is going to become much shorter in supply. World events are making that happen as well. So the global food system is in crisis. So things are only set to get worse. We are in an inflation trap because of Brexit. And all the worst things are happening in the world at the same time. And we're like frogs being boiled. And everyone's saying, no, I don't know about Schengen. And no, I don't know about this and that. I mean, God, it's urgent. We need to get rid of Brexit to actually be able to defend ourselves against these headwinds.
But this, I don't disagree with any of this. You know I don't, Liz. We've spoken many times. And I mean, you make a very powerful case for the argument that the aligning of the planets at the moment would actually render reducing our potential for food security, reducing our potential to move closer to self-sufficiency is the single stupidest thing we can do in the context of food supply. But here we are doing it. Here we are right in the middle of doing it and being told that it's a great idea. But what are you going to do in your speech? How are you, because the bloke on before you, was it, I think Stuart, he is paying more than ever before for all of his food, but he doesn't realise it's got anything to do with Brexit. He thinks his life hasn't changed at all, even as his wife prepares to retire early as a consequence partly of Brexit. How do you reach him? How do you persuade him that it's worth all the fuss and palaver? Putting 10p in Nigel Farage's slot is going to have the heart of every decent person in the country sinking. The last thing we want is more of his greasy face on the telly. But
Because, James, after Christmas, you're going to see food shortages, which are going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And food is going to become...
But then I'll just come back here and say, well, I got a turkey. What are you talking about? Project Fear.
But extended food shortages actually cause a lot of trouble. And people already, we have got, problems with people not having enough food, and there's people hospitalised with malnutrition. Our hospitals aren't coping with the influx of patients as it is. Things are set to get an awful lot worse. And instead of going, we need to let it work for a bit longer.
No, I've not said that. I've not said that. That was an early caller that pretty much everybody thought might have been yanking my chain when he claimed to have voted Remain, which is one of the occupational hazards of these sort of conversations. But no, hang on. It's the urgency that I need to.
Because globally, India is protecting wheat and rice exports already.
Yeah.
And there are significant food problems. 350 million people in the world are facing starvation right now.
Yeah, but with respect, people that voted for Brexit don't care about them.
But they're going to be impacted by it because we're competing with world markets, as we did with the vaccine for COVID. And we are actually becoming poorer and weaker by the day.
What about EFTA?
We are the largest net importer of food in the world.
Are you practicing your speech on me?
Then Japan, then us.
You're practicing your speech on me, Liz.
I am, but we need to wake up and go, do I want to be boiled
This is it. No,
or do I want to get out and stop this?
This is the trick, then. This is it. No, this is the absolute nub of the problem, isn't it? Is that you see it more clearly than I do as something that is so urgent and so important that the absolute sooner the better, whereas the idea of waiting for the oil tanker of political will, never mind public opinion, waiting for the oil tanker of political will to turn around is, in your view, a mug's game. And I know you're right.
Absolutely.
I know you're right.
Because nobody's insulated from chaos. Nobody. If we've got riots and people out on the street, no one's safe. That's the bottom line. And I don't want to be in that place. I would rather sort of say, look, for goodness sake, this has failed. Let's do what we need to do to sort it out. And at the moment, we're just being ratcheted up by the Bank of England going, we'll put interest rates up again, which is actually doing nothing at all apart from hurting more people who have got mortgages and need to buy food. So we really need to pull the cord on this and face reality and stop all the fluff and nonsense. And the other reality is, in 2019, when Boris Johnson won that election, there was already a majority for Remain, but we never got the opportunity to vote on it. And so there's never actually been a real majority for Leave. There was just a slight blimp on that day in June, whenever it was, 2016.
Largely because of the Facebook pushing by Dominic Cummings' outfit. It's all in the new book.
And so the fear of another vote, whenever the vote.
Okay, people are accusing me of not letting you get a word in edgeways, which I think is a bit rich. Frankly, I barely had a syllable.
They just want to hear from me, James.
They do, Liz. They do, and we should, as you did mention, that you are the founder of Save British Farming, so you know of what you speak. That's basically campaigning to get back into the single market in order to save British food. You mentioned boiling frogs on several occasions. Would you like a world exclusive about my new book?
Absolutely.
Not really, she says. Not really, but I'm on the radio now and it'd be embarrassing for me to say no. She's off again.
I'd like to explain to people why, if you really care about safety, security for us British people and probably for Europe, we need to face reality. Food is something we all need. It doesn't matter how much money we've got, and food is in crisis. And once it begins this crisis to go to go down this trajectory, it is not going to suddenly go, it's all right tomorrow. It's going to continue to become more of a problem. And so we have to take steps to protect this country. Us British farmers can't do that now because they've crashed our system. And the only way we can actually assure food at a reasonable price is by opening up free trade again with the people on our doorstep and making sure that we are part of that market again, which we're excluded from. And British farming then can begin to recover, but it will take some time for us to do that. But food is the most important commodity. We die without it. And so that's where we need to begin, because in 2016, food wasn't part of the campaign because they all lied and said it was going to be cheaper. And it's about time we looked at that and bugger Schengen. And why do we want to keep the pound? That every time I go over to Europe, I actually pay a tax because I've got to change into euros. Let's embrace it. I can't wait to have the euro. I can't wait to have Schengen and not have to do biometric tests every time I go to Europe.
You are brilliant.
So do Americans believe like us in Britain? We have federalisation. Embrace it. It's the future.
You are brilliant, and I feel a bit embarrassed for being so flippant and glib earlier in the conversation. I'm glad that I sat back and let you hit your stride.
Oh, that's fine. I love a challenge, James. Anytime.
I mean, crikey, I'm not really someone you need to persuade of. Well, yeah, I am actually not someone you need to persuade that you're right. I know that you're right, but the urgency actually is what you've communicated to me, and I feel a tiny bit silly now. 10:50 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm quite chastened by Liz's passion. If you were, the closer I guess you are to British farming, the clearer it is that we need to get back into the single market as soon as possible. And arguably the only way to do that is to join the European Union. EFTA is an attractive option, but as a few of you have pointed out, that would involve the other members agreeing to us joining, and there would be reasons perhaps why they wouldn't do that. But what needs to happen? Unless everyone's got a Liz in their front room, what needs to happen to push this? What am I talking about? What's the word I'm looking for? Like a tilt. I've got a switch. It's like to push it over the line. What would need to happen to just change the feeling in this conversation? Do you see what I mean? So it's not really about right and wrong. Quite often with Brexit, it's more about feelings than facts. And in some ways, the people who were right about the facts about Brexit are now on the side of the feelings, because you sort of feel now's not the time, or now's not the moment to push ahead. What would change? What would turn me or you into Liz? What would persuade us to be as committed and as urgent about the issue as she is? I don't know. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. 0345 60973. Andy's in Shrewsbury. Andy, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello.
Well, follow that. What a brilliant lady that was. Amazing. But look, just because it's between you and me, I voted to leave.
Sorry, your secret is safe with me, Andy.
Okay. I regret it.
Yes.
I'm doing penance each morning. I have to try and look my children in the face and realise I've made a terrible mistake. I do listen to you a lot now, and it's probably a little bit late in the day, but I am challenging a lot of my own opinions about things, and I suppose I used to be a little bit left of Genghis Khan, and now I'm a little bit right of Mother Teresa. But look, I think often mischievously, and I know there's thousands of people that say, well, there's no reason why the EU would have to or should do this, but I think mischievously, what would happen in our corrupt political system where there's no one with any backbone or nerve, if the EU were to turn around and say, look, it could be an error, you were lied to. If you have another referendum within 12 months, you could come back in on the same terms like nothing ever happened. Now, I know there's thousands and thousands of people who say, well, why should they? And I agree. Well, why should they, apart from the fact we were a net contributor, as I understand it.
Yes,
to the
absolutely
EU.
we were.
But I just wonder, because all of a sudden that would then have all of our political parties lined up on the edge of the swimming pool with nobody wanting to jump in because they don't know how warm the water is, waiting for someone from the EU to come blasting through and jump straight and say, come on in, the water's lovely.
Well, what you have is a choice between two known knowns, isn't it, as opposed to what you had in 2016, which was a choice between a largely unknown known, actually, and an unknown. So they could say whatever they wanted about what it was going to be like to be out, and we didn't really know how much of what we had was dependent on being in. So it was a really sort of blind choice in many ways, whereas what you've just described would be a straight comparison of two things that we have experience of, with a little side order of people bleating about us not having enough time yet to see how it's all going to work out, which is a bit silly. But I mean, let me tell you what the Daily Mail would do. Daily Mail would straight away, all guns blazing, be turning their attacks on the EU, claiming that they're trying to succeed where the Germans failed. They're trying to annex the UK, or do you know what I mean? And probably a lot of it would start happening again.
I think we have to realise as a country that these are not our decisions anymore. We made our decision. Now the issue is about how we rebuild these bridges, and I don't know what the way forward is, to be honest. In the current situation, I think if I take my own example, my own business has been purchased by a large European business, which has seen the UK as fairly easy pickings just of late. Yes. And so I actually found that voting for something which I thought was going to give me more whatever, not, because I'm now more European than I ever was. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? How much of it is dependent? And I have got no beef with people who voted leave in 2016. In retrospect, I'm amazed it was so close when you look at the effort put into one side and the effort put into the other. But how significant is it, do you think, that people are still relying on organs and individuals that encourage them to vote in the way that you did for the information that they need to actually come to an informed opinion about how it's actually going? An awful lot of the stuff that is a consequence of leaving just isn't reaching the public. And that's the challenge that any Rejoin movement faces, is the same challenge that it had all along, is actually getting facts in front of people when the other lot are going to be going for the feelings again. You have to open your eyes and you have to take your information from as many different areas as you can. And, don't be... The whole issue with this for me is that we were lied to on a grotesque scale. And I mean, that in itself, for me, is enough for us to go back to the polls. Yes. If this were a court of law over some criminal matter, the outcomes would be, facing the doors of the jail. You're absolutely right. If it was a washing powder advert,
there would be sanctions and punishments in place.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
if the Advertising Standards Authority had oversight on what happened during that period, there would be blood on the carpet. But it's politics. They can say, as you know, whatever the hell they want. And the list of the things that they said, and the things that some of which you believed, the list is endless. It's almost impossible fully to collate all of the claims that were made. And you know, then we had a year of everyone saying they knew exactly what they voted for. You don't hear that so much anymore, do you?
I do feel we are at a point politically where we cannot expect our own parties. There's an awful lot of MPs who would cheerfully break ranks and go with something if there were just one person, one organisation that were brave enough to tip it over the edge and put it out there.
It's all about timing, isn't it? You're right, because I think that you had that little moment when the Chuka Umunna and Anna Soubry, they sort of made their move and set up a new party, and it just wasn't. It's all about timing, and to do any of this without really any support from mainstream media and, of course, the BBC, utterly cowed and infiltrated by Tories. I don't know where you get that enough momentum. I don't know where reality gets enough momentum, Andy, to achieve what you describe, and that is probably the grimmest symptom of the ecosystem that we've been creating in this country since, well, by my reckoning, since Rupert Murdoch bought The Sun in 1969. An ecosystem that could allow Boris Johnson not just to become Prime Minister, despite, of course, a lifetime of lying, because as Andy points out, it's the lies that should have mattered. It's the lies that should have changed things. But not only allowed him to become Prime Minister after a lifetime of lying, but when he ceased to be Prime Minister as a consequence of his lying, colleagues and some of the most influential senior owners and members of the media continued to cheer for him. That's mad. And that's another advert for my new book, How They Broke Britain. Because that is actually, I got to the last line last night, pretty much. The Liz Truss chapter is going to be about a paragraph. But I got to the last line last night, and that was the point. It just resonated with me then when Andy said it. Is that the fact that we have become a country that doesn't just forgive liars or look the other way on liars, it rewards liars. You know, Rees-Mogg is accused this week of having made the civil service a less attractive career option. So the civil service, like every other part of the workforce in this country, riddled with vacancies and shortages. And because people like Rees-Mogg actually attack them and encourage the public to attack them, like they do with lawyers, the application rate is going down. Rees-Mogg gets knighted by the liar-in-chief. They don't just sort of, oh, that was a bit embarrassing, let's keep our heads down for a while. They get knighted. Doris thought she was going to get a seat in the House of Lords. Priti Patel got a damehood. The bully got made a dame. The liar made another liar a knight. It's not over. And as Andy says, really powerfully, I felt, the lies are the thing that we're just still, huge swathes of the country have either not registered them, or they've been or don't believe them, like Donald Trump supporters, or have been persuaded not to care about them. Incredible stuff. It really is. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. That was like the good old days a bit, wasn't it? I don't know if we carry on a bit with that or cast our net wider. I do like the scam story that's in the news today, because I very nearly fell for one last week. 3 minutes after 11, I'll probably end up making a speech. That'll be a U-turn, won't it? From wondering whether it's all a bit too much too soon to actually getting up on the podium and giving it large at the Rejoin March on the 23rd of September. 2 stories about councils in the newspapers today, or in the news today. One is in the Daily Telegraph, spoon-fed by the Taxpayers Alliance, so we'll completely ignore that until they tell you who funds them. But another from the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, looking at the question of antisocial behaviour, and claims that councils are frequently failing to use their powers to tackle it. I don't want to go all sort of, back in my day. We need a nicer word for that, don't we? To describe it, there probably is a word for it. It's something beyond nostalgia. It's a weaponized nostalgia. It's an illusory belief that everything was better in the olden days. Or I mentioned to you a few times, you see it a lot on websites, Facebook pages dedicated to old pictures of towns. I'm becoming a bit addicted to those in my old age. And people obsess about, oh, that's so much nicer. But if you were there at the time, There's a reason why these buildings were knocked down. Some of them would have been unsafe. Some of them would have been riddled with sort of vermin. Some of them would have been utterly unfit for purpose in the 21st century. I get sad. Oh, it's all gone a bit blooming middle-aged. I get sad sometimes when I look up. Do you look up much? Do you not look up? You should look up. You should really look up a lot. You see a very different town or city if you look up. And the homogenous nature, you don't. In some towns and cities, they haven't been permitted to do this, but in most British towns and cities, you can knock out the ground floor frontage and just replace it with plate glass windows. So most shops are exactly the same, and they won't change. They shift use from sandwiches to mobile phones to, health food, and the front of the shop is the same. They just change the signage. They change the branding. But if you look up, and actually every building can be different on a relatively normal high street, and some of them are much older than others, and then you can work out the ones that possibly got hit by a bomb during the Second World War because they don't fit with the rest of the street, and the width of the pavements, and you can see perhaps old signs. There's a brilliant Twitter account dedicated to sort of ghost signs. I think it may even be called ghost signs, and you see the painted signs on the buildings got nothing to do with that anymore. The building's almost certainly a coffee shop, a charity shop, a mobile phone shop, or a vape shop. There's not a lot else left. But there'll be a sign on there about when it was a restaurant with specials and 2 shillings. And I mean, it's fading. Every year there's going to be fewer and fewer of those. But look up and you see a different town, a different city. Gloucester Road in London is one of the places that I first discovered this, because when I first moved to London, I stayed in a flat on the 3rd floor. And you look out over the station and it's dripping with Victoriana. But on your ground level, all you're aware of is sort of Burger King and coffee shops. So anyway, I'm being a bit of a wazzock. Look up more. And I mention that because the environment in which you live is crucial to your mental equilibrium. It truly is. The environment in which you live, and I don't mean today the clean air issues, although that's obviously incredibly important to both your mental and physical health. Here's a question for you, actually, just a quick nod to clean air legislation and ultra-low emission zones. I've noticed that all of the people claiming that they're opposed to ULEZ because it penalises the poorest people, they're not only wrong because the figures show that the poorer you are, the less likely you are to have a car, but they're also the people that generally, if they're politicians, vote in favour of benefit cuts. And if they are pundits or commentators, they're very much of the school of thought that people using food banks need to pull their socks up or work. So what is it about the ultra-low emission zone that makes people who've spent their entire careers attacking the poor suddenly claim that they care about the poor? Does anyone? Can you think what that might be? What's that you say? They're massive hypocrites and liars? No, that can't be it. There must be a more reasonable reason why people in my line of work and in Parliament who spent their entire lives demonising the poor and claiming that anybody in receipt of welfare payments is swinging the lead, the people who kind of drove the abolition of child support for more than 2 children. Suddenly, when it comes to an ultra-low emission zone, they're claiming that they're motivated by concern for people who can't afford to pay it. It's just a bit weird, isn't it? I don't know. The world can be a confusing place at times, can't it? That's a nice phrase, rosy retrospection. It's not punchy enough to describe what I'm talking about. It makes the people sound nice. Or maybe I need to be a bit mellower in my old age. I just find it irritating, the old sort of, those were the days. We had children in iron lungs, rickets and scurvy. TB. It was great. So the physical environment in which you live is crucially important. Crucially important. You don't really appreciate this if you've always been lucky enough to live in a nice place. You take it for granted, you know. You have perhaps a little flirtation with a rougher part of town when you're a student, but we talked a lot about class yesterday, and if you are middle class and you have lived in largely middle class enclaves for much of your life. If you live in a big city, that's going to be less true than it would be if you lived in a town or a village because of the nature of juxtaposition. You can't live in North, West, East or South London, really. Even if you live in a £5 million house, there is going to be somebody living in social housing or somebody living in at the lower end of the rental market within a stone's throw of your front door. That doesn't hold true in places like Mayfair and Belgravia, but once you move out of the absolute, in fact, there are Peabody flats on Oxford Street, aren't there? There are Peabody flats around the back of Selfridges, I think. But anyway, I digress slightly. You don't know how damaging bad environments can be until you live in one. So when I say the phrase antisocial behaviour, what do you think of first? I've got no idea what just popped into your head, because it is going to depend 100% on where you live. Antisocial behaviour. You might think of dog poo. You might think of thumping bass music coming through your walls at every hour of the day. You might think of the unbearable aroma of skunk wafting through your windows as you're trying to get the children ready for school or put them to bed. You might think of the smell of urine in the lifts, or the broken windows in the high street, the boarded up shops, the graffiti on the wall of the building where you live. I say antisocial behaviour. You say what? It's interesting, that, isn't it? Well, I mean, look, if you lived in the smartest part of town, so let's imagine you're in a Belgravia townhouse. What would antisocial people walking slowly on pavements? What would antisocial behaviour be in Belgravia, do you think? What would it be? Parking, probably. It'd have something to do with parking. People who see their parking fines as a sort of, in the same way that we see parking charges. So we park somewhere, look at the sign, pay our bill, our little tariff, and then go off shopping. They park wherever they want, and they get a £200 fine, and that's their parking. That's their parking. So what would antisocial behaviour be in the nation's smartest postcodes? That's not the topic. That's just an interesting inquiry, isn't it? Because I don't know. That is a really interesting little point we've just stumbled on. When I start talking about this stuff, I've never got any idea where I'm going. But sometimes I do. That's the one, isn't it? I say antisocial behaviour, and you say what? So what do I say for antisocial behaviour? People parked up in your street who are either having a smoke or doing a deal. That can be very annoying because it's the small hours of the morning and you're woken by the music, and then they zoom off again. But they're not. They're impacting upon your peace. They're not impacting upon your life particularly. Potholes, is that antisocial? It's not antisocial behaviour. It's a council responsibility, but it's not no one's going around making potholes in the same way that they might be going around and writing their name on a building. Fly tipping used to drive me nuts. I've mellowed a bit because since I've been writing a book, I haven't been spending as much time as I usually do in Norfolk. But if you are on a lovely walk in the countryside, or a drive, to be fair, and you see a sort of gateway where someone's dumped a fridge, that drives me potty. Because I don't know, I think what it is, there's two types of antisocial behaviour. Brandon says Lee Anderson. I say antisocial behaviour, you say what? 30p Lee knock. Yeah, okay, I take your point. You have that sort of thuggish, foul-mouthed demeanour. These days, of course, it's deputy chair of the Conservative Party, but if it was screaming in the pub car park, the kind of trite bilge that Anderson comes out with, that would count as antisocial behaviour as well. But there's two types, isn't there? There's the conscious and the either the unconscious or the less conscious. So fly tipping is an act of contempt. It's an act of social contempt. It's not antisocial behaviour. It's an act of social contempt. It is saying to the society in which you live, screw you. I'm dumping a fridge here. I'm emptying my builder's rubble here. Graffiti is less so, oddly, because depending on what you're actually doing, graffiti artists don't think that they are necessarily damaging the environment in which they're operating. Some do. But the kind of knowledge that what you are doing is causing considerable upset to the people around you. That's antisocial behaviour, and it could be, as I just proved to you, could be anything, couldn't it? I say antisocial behaviour, you say what? Anything from defecating dogs to drug dealers and everything in between. Councils are, it's reported today, frequently failing to use their powers to tackle antisocial behaviour. One example given to the local government and social care ombudsman involved a 13-hour-long party in a home. Speakers outside, loud music lasting more than 13 hours, to which the council responded by saying that it was nothing to do with them. The complainant was told that the council would only consider taking action if he recorded 6 incidents within 25 days. 63 cases it investigated. It's not a lot. It's probably a victim of cuts or austerity, as liars like to call it, ranging from low-level issues such as dog fouling, I told you, and inconsiderate parking, to more serious harassment and intimidation. So I'm interested in, and I don't want it to go all victim Eldrew, but I am interested in, I'm actually quite interested in what you thought of when I said antisocial behaviour, to be honest, whether you've complained about it or not. You could probably do a map of socio-economic status or property prices, and then another map of a list of antisocial behaviours, and you could knit the two together. So I live in an area where the average house is worth £250,000, and I get really annoyed by da-da-da-da-da-da. I live in an area where the massive majority of housing is rented or social housing, and I get really annoyed by da-da-da-da-da. I live in a rich area, and I'm mostly concerned by blah-blah-blah-blah. It'd be quite interesting to do that, but I don't know that we've got the wherewithal. When were you staggered to be told that the council couldn't do anything? You're sitting there, and you know the music's a killer, isn't it? An absolute killer. You're going to have a party, tell the neighbours, live in a middle-class part of town, stick a bottle of wine on their doorstep, say, we're going to be up a little late on Friday. It's my eldest's 18th. And you know, there's a marquee in the back garden or whatever it is. I don't know. And then if you're in a tower block, and I've had this experience when I lived in Battersea, oh man alive, I was actually toying with the idea of throwing stuff onto the balcony of the flat above, like rotten fish or something like that, because I couldn't. There was no recourse going back 30 years. So I was a slightly different person, but the shock at discovering there was nothing you could do, I think, is the human question here. So we'll do both. We'll do, what constitutes the worst example of antisocial behaviour where you are. But I just want to know, these examples given when councils have said, no, there's nothing we can do about it. There is nothing we can do about it. And you couldn't quite believe it, because you know that, and this is why I warned at the very beginning of this little meander through my mind, I warned at the very beginning that this was going to suffer a bit from back in my day-itis. My day-itis, we could call it. There you go, my day-itis. Because it would have happened once. So what are we talking about? What is it around where you are that drives you absolutely potty? You don't have to have complained about it. It drives you absolutely potty, and no one has done anything about it. The council would be expected to do something about it. If you work in the council, for the council, with the council, I know it's going to have almost everything to do with cuts, but how useless are you? How powerless are you these days to deal with any of the things that we've just heard about? Hit the numbers now. The more the merrier. Don't hold back because you think it's trivial. That's the whole point, I think. It's a broken window theory, which isn't quite as solid evidentially as we used to think it was 20 years ago. But the idea was, if you fix a broken window, an area stays nice. If you don't fix a broken window, the next thing to come along is a graffito, or then maybe someone will think, this will be a good place to do a mugging. Or do you see what I mean? There's a sort of domino effect of antisocial behaviour that leads from the little to the big. Beth says, we're in Surrey, it's lawnmowers on a Sunday. That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. But you've got to mow the lawn, Beth. I suppose it depends what time. So what is it where you are? 0345 60 973. And what can you not believe goes unchallenged today on your doorstep? I listen, this is the radio phoning equivalent of the public pump, isn't it? The town pump, because this isn't world-shattering stuff, but it's the stuff that gets right on our goat on a smaller basis, antisocial behaviour, and the difference, depending on where you live, of what constitutes antisocial behaviour. This is fascinating. James, my neighbour lets his German Shepherd wander around outside my flat off the lead. The dog's nearly attacked my greyhound on several occasions, but he refuses to put the dog on the lead. We've informed the warden, but he does nothing. Desperate and powerless. I get that, desperate and powerless. It doesn't sound like a big deal to other people, but it does to me. I live in Stoke-on-Trent, says Phil, and the local kids set fire to the local allotment sheds. The police called this antisocial behaviour. I'd call it criminal damage. I wonder if the police possibly label more serious crimes antisocial behaviour in order to make the statistics look better. Well, it doesn't matter really, does it, Phil? It's not going to rebuild your shed. And I like this one. I can't share my name as I'm a tutor. Kensington and Chelsea has a 24-hour helpline for antisocial behaviour. They respond within the hour. I've used them for noisy building work outside of hours and long parties that disrupt sleep. They attend and send a letter to note the case. Do you know, the last time I got involved in this kind of conduct was when I lived in Kensington and Chelsea. I think it was Kensington. Is Earl's Court in Kensington and Chelsea? And the people that live downstairs, every time, the lad I lived with, it was his flat. And he'd taken we didn't have wooden floors, but he had quite Hessian-y carpets, you know, the kind of quite coarse carpets. And I think it must have annoyed the people downstairs because they used to, every time we came in, they would turn the sound up. And it was speech radio, oddly. It was before I worked here, so it might have been LBC. But they turn it up to maximum. And I was pretty chill about it. But it must have been directly below my mate's bedroom because he used to get in a right old tizzy about it. So he phoned the noise abatement people, the environmental health people. And after a few occasions, I think we had a machine possibly in the flat that measured the noise. And after a few occasions, they went to see the neighbours. They went downstairs to see the neighbours. And they genuinely, I don't know if I've ever told you this before. Have we stumbled across an anecdote I haven't already told you 1,000,000 times? It turned out they had quite big speakers on top of their wardrobe, facing up. They literally designed to annoy the people in the flat above. But that was in Kensington and Chelsea, so maybe that's why it got dealt with. 23 after 11 is the time. Courtney's in Lambeth. Courtney, what would you like to say?
Hi there.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Good.
There you go. See, that's the opposite of antisocial behaviour.
So I'm sorry, I'm in a car. We're pulled over, but I live in Lambeth. I live in a really nice area called Myatt's Field, and we live next to a council flat, which is great. The neighborhood is very, multi-level SES, which is, I think, adds a lot of vibrancy to it. But the thing that is shocking to me is that the council has allowed people to break in and out of the council flat for months now, almost 18 months.
Well, people who don't live there are living there?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
They keep coming in and out. And one of the people who's either a regular or a visitor, we're not sure, keeps taking pictures of me as I walk into my house, which is so creepy.
Yes.
And I'm, a 30-year-old woman, so it's just...
No, that's
annoying.
Outrageous. It's beyond outrageous. It's violating, isn't it?
Well, right. And so we've dealt with the police, we've dealt with the council, and it's frustrating because there doesn't seem to be any change. Additionally, there's a million issues, right? We have a small dog. We're afraid to let her out of the house at night because we don't know.
So do you think someone's dealing in the flat or something like that? I'm not clear on...
I'm fairly certain that someone's dealing because the police and fire department usually comes round once every week, every 2 weeks to deal with a fire alarm around 2-3 a.m. I took a video once and it was
hang on, because that now, you see, if I was their lawyer, I would say, but madam, you have filmed them on occasion.
Oh, no. Not of them, just the activity outside. So it was like a McDonald's in Brixton at 3 a.m. On a Tuesday. The amount of cars that were coming and going, I was like, this is crazy.
There's something going on.
There's something going on.
And what have you been told when you have sought intervention? Sorry, we can't deal with this until, or just sort of pat on the head and off you go? What have you, particularly on... Because I don't know what they could do about the cars congregating, hugely annoying though it is,
right,
or the ingress and egress from the building. But the bloke taking pictures of you, what have you been told about that?
That's the most frustrating thing. The egress thing has been dealt with well. They've put, but it's still happening. But they keep trying to block up all the windows.
Right.
And I think the people that are living there legitimately are kind of having a battle on their hands.
It could be one of those cuckoo arrangements where somebody vulnerable has their home taken over by.
I think that's some of what's happening.
But what about the photographing?
Yeah, so they just told me to report it to the police. I reported it to the police, and nothing happened. So
nothing at all. I mean, they must have got back to you. Didn't even get back to you.
I got a report, and then it closed. I don't know.
Okay. Oh, well, I mean, I don't know, actually, whether or not that would have been different when we had better funded authorities or better funded resources. I asked this question. You don't have to answer it. I mean, I appreciate that you're putting a brave face on it, and I don't know who's in the car with you, but the impact on your mental health of the drip, 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 the attrition of this.
So what's helpful is that I live with my husband and my friend from uni and her husband. The four of us live in a house together.
Yeah.
Like a 5-bedroom house, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
But, my husband has been very helpful, and so is my friend's husband, and just every time I notice it happening, sort of running out and sort of screaming at him. And it would be scarier if I didn't feel that I had the support. The thing with the dog is frustrating. Like, I don't like to leave her at home if we're not there, because there's been so many dog nappings. That is been an issue.
Yeah, okay. So that worry, and as you say, you've got someone, if you like, going into bat for you. But that affects their mental health, because every time they rush out into the street, their adrenaline comes up. I tell you what, you probably are. You're probably all a bit hypervigilant about this, and that can be one of the most exhausting long-term conditions in which to find yourself. Some of us live most of our lives in a state of hypervigilance without realising it. But there you go. I mean, it doesn't matter where you live. There's something different, something that gets under your radar, gets under your skin. 28 minutes after 11 is the time. Alex is in Stroud. He says, things can be a little different here in the country, James. We suffer from incessant fires. Farmers and other people all seem to be constantly burning stuff. That is antisocial. You talk about the smell of skunk coming into your kitchen in the morning, then the smell of burning anything coming into your garden at the weekend can be equally annoying. I could squeeze in Lucy in Hampstead before the news. Lucy, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Lucy.
I've been listening to you for years, and this is the first time I've spoken to you.
How many?
Oh, God, about 10 years.
Oh, that's all right. That's good. You get a badge, actually.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, carry on. What made you pick up the phone today?
So I live in a lovely house in Hampstead with, I say house, it's a flat with other flats within the house. And it's a beautiful area. And above me, I have a drug dealer. I have the whole of Camden town druggies coming and buying their drugs here. It's been, all the neighbours around have reported it to the council about the social behaviour, because they're ringing our doorbell day and night.
Yeah.
And then we had one morning where about 10 policemen arrived. And they quietly went up and they rammed the door down.
Right.
And there were no arrests, unfortunately. And the council do nothing about it. And they still live up there and they still continue to do what they do.
I mean, they haven't been caught in the act then, it would seem.
Yeah, I guess.
Is it all day, every day? Is it
all day, every day?
And is it's a split house, so it's stairs, so you can hear people trumping up and down the stairs all the time.
Past my flat door, and the door slamming all day long, because it's like Piccadilly Circus.
Yeah,
and
I feel so sorry
outside
for you.
On the street as well.
Right.
Cars coming, motorbikes turning up. And the council, they don't do anything. And, I didn't know that...
What the council could do. What could the council do? I mean, the police, just a sense that somebody somewhere should be able to do something, isn't there? I can't believe that you're left in this kind of scenario.
Exactly. And it's been going on for about 2 years now.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and but I kind of got a bit more used to it.
Okay.
I mean, originally it was like sleepless nights. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm living with this. And now I've come slightly.
Well, it does.
immune.
It's like living on a flight path, I suppose. You wake up the first. I remember when we moved in somewhere. Woke up the first morning, bolt upright. What the hell have we done? And then after 6 months, it was just background, occasional noticing. But it's no fun though.
I wondered whether to go to my MP to try and do something, because I thought if the council don't do anything, then Mike says else to go.
Mike, well, the problem is you don't want to pick a fight with the people upstairs because you don't know.
No.
Mike means well, but people sometimes don't think through to chapter 2 of their suggestions. She needs to put a sign on her doorbell saying "We are not drug dealers" at this flat, and put CCTV outside, which is like putting an invitation through the upstairs letterbox saying, "Why don't you come downstairs and tell me how you feel about me trying to close down your illegal business." I can't see that quite working.
No, and I live alone, so
Yeah, exactly. But there it is.
So
I mean, you live alone. That is at the front of the queue of people you would expect to have somewhere to turn to, and that's a fundamental foundation stone of polite society, of civilised society. You need somewhere to turn to. This is again something to Lucy. Take care. I hate the sound of that. And I probably should apologise for bringing one of my own hobby horses into it, but it's very, very relevant. I mentioned there were 2 stories involving councils today. One spoon-fed to the Daily Telegraph by the Taxpayers Alliance, which is, of course, one of the great sort of Tufton Street organisations. These think tanks, these lobby groups or think tanks, they exist to cut public spending. They don't think stuff should be spent on looking after the public. That's why they can't tell you who funds them. Because everybody sensible recognises somebody like Lucy should have somewhere to turn to. But they've cut it, so you don't. And that is why, if you're facing a choice today between talking about some spoon-fed bilge in the Daily Telegraph from the Taxpayers Alliance or talking about the real-life experiences of people who pay council tax and are not getting the service they deserve because of all the cuts, you probably should lean towards the second one. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. It's 11:36. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Ooh, here's a tricky one. James, we have a ranting neighbour. He wears headphones, and to find out what he's ranting about, I have to turn on LBC. He rants about the right stuff, but I wish he'd shut up. You tell him, please. You're asking me to address a listener directly here, aren't you? Okay. If you listen to this programme wearing headphones and find yourself correctly infuriated by the corruption and the complicity and the client journalism that is turning this country into a shadow of its former self, and you, perhaps without realising it, are articulating this inner rage, please remember how thin the walls are in your place, in your abode. What's the alternative? If it's good for you, get it off your chest. Better out than in, they say, don't they? But I just remember that, it may well be that your neighbour can hear your every rant and rave. Maybe if you took the headphones off. But then he'd be listening to me on the radio all the time. I tell you what, if everybody puts me on between 10 and 1 every day, then you're never going to be disturbed by what the neighbours are doing, are you? I wonder how we could do that. Do you reckon we could get and then open the windows? It'd be like an advert. It'd be like the whole town, the whole village. 11:37 is the time. What is it? What is it about the phrase antisocial behaviour? It doesn't quite reach the sides, does it? And I think part of the reason is what we happened upon earlier. I say those words, and we all think of completely different things. Completely different things. Rob's in Sheffield. Rob, what made you pick up the phone?
So I'd like to offer a defence of local policing and local councils in this. And yes. I know it's a bit of a... because
Which are you? Are you a local police or a local council?
I am a local councillor. I'm a local councillor in Sheffield. Since I was elected a couple of months ago, I don't think a day has gone past where I have not received an email in my council inbox saying, this has gone wrong. This is antisocial behaviour. What are you doing about it?
Yes.
And you can broadly categorise them into 3 different areas. There's the criminal antisocial behaviour. So that would be things like lower-level drug dealing or criminal damage, vandalism. There is what I would classify as council-related antisocial behaviour. That would be neighbourly disputes where one neighbour is in a council-owned property, fly tipping, noise, something the council...
You've been on a crash course, haven't you, in the last 2 months?
I know. You have no idea, James. You have no idea. And And that's stuff that the council has got teams to deal with. And then you've got things like community antisocial behaviour, which will be antisocial driving, dirt bikes.
That's one. That's one near my mum's, actually. I should put that on the list.
And all of these have got different factors feeding into them and different ways that council and local policing.
So you've listened to half an hour of oversimplistic conversation, really?
Well, no, not at all, because everyone has a different view on it. The people who live in London will have a very different view of antisocial behaviour to someone who's living in Sheffield or someone who lives in rural Lincolnshire.
Yeah.
And the overriding thing, and this is why I want more conversation to come on to just generally within the media, how do we look at our local councils? How do we fund them? How do we make sure that they have the resources to do the really boring stuff that you just expect councils to do? Because the police need more funding. I think we've been saying this for years. The police need more funding, and the team we've got up in the north of Sheffield, absolutely brilliant. But I'll tell them about I'll tell them about some low-level drug dealing that I know is happening in my patch. And they're like, thanks for telling us. We'll send some people up there, but I know it won't get done because they don't have the manpower to be ever at once doing everything. And I'd love them to. And the residents will say, what are you doing about this? And I'll say, I've told the police. That's all I can do.
Yes.
They've got a maximum number of officers and community support officers. They'll do what they can do.
And of course, community policing was one of the things to suffer most under Theresa May when she stood in front of the Police Federation and told them that cutting police numbers wouldn't actually cut the quality of the job that they could do. What have you been shocked by, Rob? What have you? Let me think in tabloid terms briefly. If you, like the one that's crossed your desk when you haven't been quite able to believe that you're not really able to do anything.
Oh, I was saying to producer when I was on the pre-screen. I don't think anything has truly shocked me.
Okay.
Beyond just how ill-equipped our local organisations are to be dealing with this.
Yeah.
So, a case in point, fly tipping.
Yes.
My ward is half suburban, half rural. We've got areas that perfect for fly tipping. And I'll go to the environmental team and I'll say, there is a major issue with fly tipping there. They'll send a van out. And I said, I want this to stop happening. And they said, we don't have the funds.
What could you do to make it stop happening, though?
Well, we have, I've seen, and I talked to other Lib Dem councillors up and down the country, things like cameras or things like making sure that.
And then you track down the AMPR. You track down the registration numbers, and that's just bodies, is it? That's literally. I mean, it's the obvious answer, isn't it? But who's going to go and do it? I'm busy all day. The money's not there to pay. And then you open the Daily Telegraph, and you've got the taxpayers are spoon-feeding stories about how there's too much money already going into council coffers.
It is infuriating because the local policing team that we've got in the north of Sheffield is absolutely amazing. The teams I deal with in the council, whether that be environmental teams, whether that be housing, whether that be parks, whether that be even just the north area team that looks after my ward and a couple around it, they are all amazing. I can see that these people have gone into local government because they've got a passion for the area that they want to deal with. Yeah. But they are pulled in so many different directions. They would also love to have those cameras up. They would also love to have enough council stock that if there is a neighbourly dispute, that they can just separate people out and say, okay, you guys, you probably don't gel. Let's work out where else you might in the city you might gel. And that is fundamentally part of the reason, is that we aren't talking about local government enough. And then when we do talk about local government, people look at council tax. Council tax is one of the most hated taxes in the UK. And people see it going out, but and this is, honest God, a conversation I had on the doorstep in the run-up to the election. They said, whoever I vote for, you're all going to be the same. And nothing's going to change. The bins are going to be bad, the buses are going to be bad, the roads are going to be bad. And that is an incredibly painful conversation because me and the other candidates, we've been walking, we've been talking, and we all know that our ability to change it is fundamentally constrained. Yeah, because we just don't have the funds.
You're not losing your mojo, are you, Rob? You haven't 2 months into the job. No, you're not. You're not thinking I can't be doing with this. It's nothing like what I was expecting. You're thinking this is even more of a challenge that I am going to rise to. I am Rob, and I am rising.
I am stubborn. That is what I am, and what it's allowed me to do. And I was loosely interested in national politics.
Yes,
but I've looked further, and it's why I look at national politics going, we need to start talking, which is why I rang in today. We need to start talking more about local government. We need to start being more attentive as to what is happening in our town halls. Because Westminster, that deals with health and defence.
Sure.
I say approximately 80% of the stuff that you deal with on a day-to-day basis is not dealt with down in Westminster. It's dealt with in your town hall. It's dealt with in your city hall.
At a local
and
level.
At a local level. But engagement in local politics, there's a reason why the turnout for local elections 30-40%.
Because they haven't got a clue. And maybe, and that's possibly whenever we find ourselves contemplating the state of the status quo, you wonder whether actually there are vested interests that quite like it like that. That suits them down to the ground to keep these sort of issues in relative darkness. Rob, you sound quite inspiring, mate, and I don't mean that in any way a condescending or patronising way. Quite the opposite, in fact. You are genuinely, you sound inspiring. Your thirst for public service, proper public service, is sensational. I am reminded, though, of a conversation I had yesterday with Polly Toynbee for this week's Full Disclosure, a really lovely conversation with an extraordinary woman, a brilliant journalist. Picking up on something we've discussed a few times, the way that the right have managed to turn do-gooder into a pejorative. There is Rob. He wants to do good. You could hear that, right? That was clear. He wants to help the people in his ward who have come to him for help in their droves, in their sackloads, as he described it. He's only been in the job for 2 months. So next time you hear someone doing that, just think, why are you trying to stop people like Rob from doing good? Why are you trying to turn that thirst for public service, that enthusiasm for community, into something to be sneered at and something to be mocked? And then when you're finished on do-gooding, you can move on to virtue signalling. And when you're finished on why they're trying to turn virtue signalling into a negative, you can look at wokeness. And eventually you may realise that the scale of the effort put into persuading you that people who want to improve your life are the problem, because they're not. It's 11:49. If you are listening to James O'Brien, well, you are listening to James O'Brien. I was about to say if you are listening to James O'Brien, but actually still have some interest in the football, it was 1-0 to England. 1-0 to England at half-time. Could it possibly be coming home? We shall see. Back to antisocial behaviour. We had a brothel in our basement. I'm reading this. It's from Sophie. We had a brothel in our basement in Islington. The punters used to come to our door by mistake and then scurry downstairs shamefaced. The saddest part was that sometimes cars parked opposite would have partners and children inside. Oh, sorry, waiting to drive the women home at the end of their shift. Oh, Lord. Yeah, that is sad, actually. If this antisocial behaviour, what about all the COVID partying that took place at 10 Downing Street? Asks Daniel. It's a good point. That would qualify as antisocial behaviour, actually. Pretty's in Leeds. Pretty, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello. Hello. So my parents live in Headingley in Leeds, yes. Just up from the cricket ground. So a lot of students live in the area.
Did you say students then, with a little bit of malice in your voice?
Maybe.
I think it came out because I don't know if you're familiar with the Steve Coogan's character Paul Carr. He used to go students, flipping students. You didn't sound like that, but there was a hint.
Yeah, maybe that's where I got it from. So a lot of students alongside residents as well, and they are the main cause of antisocial behaviour.
That's a tricky one, though, isn't it? Because, that's what students do.
Yeah, and I was a student too.
And how antisocial were you?
I went to university in Hull,
right.
And so I think I was quite respectful of the neighbours. I think it's just... we have a neighbourhood team in the area, and the students, because of Facebook and things like that, and people in the area, they'll say this is a student area.
Okay,
so,
that's what I just did, actually. I do apologise for being so lazy.
Yeah.
What annoys your mum and dad most? What is the kind of, what are the key offences, the top offences?
Well, they live next door to a family and older people, so they're kind of on the edge of it.
Right.
But I think the loud music, which is fine, they don't mind the partying. I think it's more things like urinating in the street. So one day I was round for Sunday dinner, came out of the house at 4:00. The student house opposite, the lad was urinating against the bush on the outside of the house.
A little scrote.
I know. So
at 4:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah,
it doesn't be any better at 4:00 in the morning, but there'd at least be the excuse of not having anywhere else to go, I suppose.
I know.
What did you do?
Well, I challenged him and said, "What the hell are you doing?"
Was he still holding the offending weapon?
Yeah, I think he was in the middle of it, or maybe he was at the end.
Okay.
And he said somebody's in the bathroom. So
of
I
the
said,
wee or the
why?
weapon? Go on, sorry, carry on.
So, yeah, he just...
That's
it's just
incredible.
that kind of disrespectful behaviour.
And have they complained about it? Have they tried to get any? Because you're on a hiding to nothing in a student area, which is why they say it's a student area, isn't it?
Yeah. So we do have an antisocial behaviour team at Leeds City Council. But for parties at night and things like that, but you can't help what's happening during the day.
No.
And I think the residents just find it really difficult because obviously students don't pay any council tax, so that probably impacts on the funding that the council have to deal with these things.
Is that definitely true? Surely, if they're living if everyone living in a house has to pay council tax, don't they?
I thought students
get let off it?
Yeah, because when I did a master's a couple of years ago, so I didn't have to pay my council tax.
Oh, no, fair enough.
But so that obviously impacts on the services that the council can provide.
Everywhere it can. I mean, and that preponderance, I know Headingley a bit, but I did 30 years ago when I had friends studying there. It is absolutely student central, like sort of Fallowfield in Manchester or somewhere like that, where the community is actually geared towards students. But you're right, you forget that people are going to be living there who are absolutely outraged. To be fair, if I was a student and someone was weeing in the garden, I'd be pretty unhappy about it. But if you're of a certain age, it's going to be even more annoying. Thank you, Pretty. It's one of those phone-ins, this, where you wish there was a button you could press to sort of fix the problem that somebody's called in with, but obviously there isn't. Back to Sheffield. James is there. James, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Nice to talk to you again.
Likewise.
So our problem, I don't want to make it too much about a problem about us because we're more concerned about the person causing the antisocial behaviour.
Right.
We live on quite a leafy street in Sheffield on the west side. There's lots of driveways.
So up on the hills then?
Up on the hills, when I can jog in the morning out into the Peak District, it's lovely. So this isn't I know. It's
what we
nice
used to call Nick Clegg country.
He was our MP.
There you go.
Yeah.
Ding, ding, ding. Carry on.
Followed by Jared O'Mara.
Yeah, we won't go there.
No, another
well,
story.
He didn't, did he? So there it
is. But our road is very nice,
yes.
And consequently, it got noticed recently that there was one car always parked on our road in the afternoons with a certain lady parked in it.
Right.
And she got noticed by myself and the neighbours because she plays very, very, very loud music with the windows down, the engine running, the lights on when it's dark enough to need the lights on. And she'd be there more and more, and always in the afternoon, and maybe after her work, we don't know. And a few neighbours would try and talk to her, and she told them to leave her alone in no uncertain terms.
Okay.
And then this has changed, and it's got later and later. We see her more, and we now see her between 11 and 1 in the morning, music blaring.
And you think she's probably not very well?
We think she's not very well. When she rants out the windows, she rants in what sounds like either speaking in tongues, sometimes foreign language.
Okay.
It's extremely concerning. There's a level of
and who have you contacted?
Who have you contacted? We've contacted the police. On a number of occasions, I phoned the police.
Right.
I've phoned the 121 line, and they make a note of it and say someone will call. One time, a police officer told me that it would be better to call 999 and tell them that we were concerned that she may be dangerous in charge of a vehicle.
Yes.
So I did that, And they said, sorry, until she gets out of the car and starts threatening people physically, there's nothing we can do.
When she's in the car, she's safe from scrutiny.
Yeah. But of course, there's
How
incidents.
bizarre.
So we're concerned about her and her mental health.
Yeah.
We're also concerned about, look at the incident that happened a couple of months back in Nottingham. You don't want things to escalate to the point where something really bad could have been averted.
Mm. Yeah, oh, I see what you mean. You mean the vehicle out of the yes, you do. I mean, what, just thinking out loud, what would be, who could actually intervene to your satisfaction or her satisfaction? Would it be a medical intervention? And then they say
I think so.
And then they turn around and say that she's actually fine. She just chooses to do this with her spare time. I grant you it's unlikely, but then there'd be nothing that could be done.
Well, I think next I'm going to start trying to contact the social services, the council, see if they can, because the police are essentially, the police even said to me, maybe report it to the council because she's idling her engine, but that's nothing to do with the police, it's a council issue. So there seems to be some almost buck passing.
But also not knowing quite something wrong is happening, but it's actually quite hard to pin down precisely what it is that would be actionable, that would actually prompt an intervention. And is it every single night?
It's maybe 3 out of 7.
Okay, but then on the nights when it's not happening, you've got that slight tension of thinking it might be about to start again, haven't you? That sort of...
My wife says that I jump out of bed and open the window when I hear a car pass just to see if it's... So it gets under your skin.
That's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That, and there is something, I don't know, violating about antisocial behaviour on your doorstep when it gets through your window, through your door, which is even more disturbing than mere, for want of a better word, environmental antisocial behaviour. James, good luck with that. It sounds no fun at all. Josh is in Newham. Josh, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for having us on.
You're welcome.
First time caller, so be gent.
Always, Josh, always.
So I'm a teacher based in East London and absolutely love what we do. Love my job. I'm in one of the professions that you can say that you do love it. But I think there's not enough that is currently being done in education to work with young people to, first of all, I think, make them realise what antisocial behaviour is.
Yes.
And no matter how much we try, I think schools are a microcosm of rules and boundaries which students abide to. Now, where I work in Newham, it is a deprived borough. However, the school that we're in is, we're fortunate; it's well resourced,
right? And
students work really well in there. But as soon as you take them outside of that environment, they almost, not all of them, I'm not generalising, but a large sort of cohort of young people will kind of have this mob mentality where they'll get with their friends.
And you think you rule the roads.
They do, and I think young people are so much more streetwise.
You were like that, weren't you, with your mates?
No, I don't think. Everybody has.
And if someone came and complained about how you were behaving, you'd all fall about laughing. Come on.
But what you referenced earlier with back in my day,
yeah,
I knew that. Always felt that I would never be able to get away with anything. Nowadays, young people feel like they can.
Did you though?
Yeah,
because you've got a severe case of my dayitis here, Josh. I think, but you might be right. I mean, it does happen, doesn't it?
Look what happened on Oxford Street the other day.
Yes.
That mob mentality of.
But if we'd had the technology in our day, that would have happened. It doesn't mean that society has changed. It just means that the ability of troublemakers to coordinate their plan has changed a bit.
The coordination of planning. No, I agree with that. Yeah, it's easy to coordinate. But no, I think that the point is that if we had more resource to educate young people in school, I think we
and maybe some restorative justice as well, actually helping people see the consequences of what they've done, because they think it's funny to go around. I think you mentioned lobbing eggs when you were talking to the producer, and it's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing to do.
With a lot of centres where young people would go to, they're no longer there.
That's a crucial point as well, because you're not making excuses when you say that they're bored. You're just saying that one of the reasons why someone's doing something is because they can no longer do something else, which is a really good point. I think you're all right, Josh. I think you're safe from my dayitis for at least another decade. I got a bad case of it, though. It's 12:01. It's 5 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Now, we're going to go full in now, all in on my dayitis. What is my dayitis, James? Well, it's when you say things like, well, in my day. Could we call it Well in My Day? No, just My Day. And I'll stop now. It's not that funny or that clever. But I used to do this all the time. Have you noticed, if you're kind enough to have been listening to this nonsense for a while now, I think of Lucy in Hampstead, who's got 10 years. We should have come up with some sort of loyalty card, Keith. We should have been giving people stamps every year that they've been listening to the show, and then they get, I don't know, special discounts on my new book, How They Broke Britain, which is published on November the 2nd. I'm going on tour as well. Have I mentioned the fact that I'm going on tour? I'm playing Manchester, Northampton, Bristol. You can find it all on my Twitter account, but I'll start plugging it more as we get closer to the time, because I would hate for you to miss it. Playing is it the Union Chapel in Islington? Is that what it's called? Playing that as well. 6 minutes after 12 is the time. Have you noticed, as I've got older, my subject selection has changed because of the age of my children? Not because of the age of me, but because of the age of my children. So we have not talked for a million years about anxious parents not letting their children play outside. I think we used to do it on a monthly basis because I was very conscious of it. I was very conscious of, it's hugely important, isn't it? I think it is. What came up the other day? What were we talking about the other day when it was? Oh, it was about the phones, wasn't it? It was that psychologist who talked about how your personality is formed by play as a child, and the fact that you're more likely now to be on your phone than you are outside is changing how the personalities are formed. It was an amazing bit of research, that, and someone will shortly remind me of who did it and what it said. But that's not what we're talking about today. I could be wrong, and as I glance down at the story that I'm about to refer to, I see a picture of two children holding games console controllers. But I don't want this conversation to be about technology, all right? I want it to be about parenting. Because the importance of children playing outdoors was, I think, brought into very sharp focus during the pandemic lockdowns. You remember when you weren't really even allowed to leave the house except for once or twice a day. I find this really interesting. You compare children today to 30 years ago when I was 21, so not actually a child. And new research from the University of Essex would suggest that the approach to playing outside it's had all of its fun removed. Anxious parents, alongside the technology and alongside the increased awareness of so-called stranger danger, but anxious parents are not letting their children play outside. And that's what I want to talk to. That's who I want to talk to now. Because the impacts of this, I think, are probably both large and invisible. And visible. I mean, some of them will be visible. But without falling into an enormous my dayitis hole, what can we say with confidence? So we've been chatting together now for 20 years in some cases every morning. And you must know now that it's not actually true. All right, so when my kids were younger, I really worried about them not playing outside anywhere near as much as I did. I mean, I grew up for most of my youth in rural England, in down a lane where a farm was. Our house used to be a farm. So there was no a comparison with where I was bringing my children up in leafy suburbia, but in house-lined streets, so places where you could see the neighbours from your bedroom window. I didn't have that growing up. It was a bit close to idyllic, actually. So I was conscious of that, and I wasn't feral, but I would disappear at 10 o'clock in the morning on my Woolworths racer, and I would come back at dusk. I'd go out on my bicycle sometimes with sandwiches, and I wouldn't come back again. And if we were playing with the neighbours, Mum would have a bell. She'd step out into the back garden and ring a bell when it was time for us to come back from meal. She'd have no clue where we were. Absolutely no clue where we were. As I got a little older, I'd go into town, either meet up with people or, because I was at boarding school, so there weren't that many people from school that I lived nearby, hook up with people from my previous school. We'd go out into Birmingham together. And I'm talking 13 now, 13, 14. But it's more the playing soldiers or the playing sport or the utterly unsupervised play that we are apparently not doing anymore. It's a really interesting one, actually. So the study's been published in the journal Sociology, which we talk. Hey, there you go, Sociology again. That's twice in a week. Sociology of Health and Illness, and it talks about parents worrying that the lack of spontaneous play means their children are not as developed and rounded as they could be. Listen to this from one of the from the study's author, John Day. He says, until around the 90s, parents were not expected to endlessly entertain and monitor their children in the same way they are today. So children had greater freedom to play independently. But since those children have become parents themselves, society has changed, so there is a heightened feeling of responsibility for their children's development. And he lists what we just listed. One aspect of the problem is increased fears around stranger danger and traffic, which means opportunities for children to be physically active through spontaneous play have become limited. So I think we'll be a bit brutal, and this is what I mean about me changing my approach to some stories as my own children have got older. So as they move out of the catchment area for a conversation like this, I feel myself possibly leaning towards being a little less accommodating and kind to the parents still in it than I would have been when I was alongside you. I want to get that out early because I don't want to upset anybody. But how do you overcome that anxiety? How much damage do you think you're doing to your children? Do you actually worry about it? You think about, and don't give me the Facebook stuff about drinking out of the garden hose and all that malarkey. That's terminal my dayitis. I mean, does it do? How will we know whether it does damage to children or not? So you think about you growing up, and I think as recently as the 90s, this would be true, and unsupervised or spontaneous play was the norm. I had a producer a few years ago, my first ever producer actually. He used to get really cross about this subject because he'd say, why would anybody want to go outside and play? Have you seen the quality of these games that you've got? And I kind of got quite torn on that because, I'd play cricket with the lad over the road. We'd have a 5-day test match, 1 against 1, using an old lawnmower grass collector as the wickets. And these were endless summers, endless summers. But to be honest, in terms of what they called, it's not pheromones, but dopamine. In terms of dopamine hits and stuff like that, we probably would have been addicted to video games if they'd been a little bit more sophisticated than they were at the time. I just don't know. Is it a moral panic? Oh, children don't play outside anymore. Well, nor do adults. Where is your dad most likely to be? Outside playing golf or at home playing PlayStation? I'll tell you where he's more likely to be. He's more likely to be at home playing PlayStation. So why have we got a problem with kids doing it? I said I wasn't going to bring technology into this. I was wrong. Sue me. Technology is an absolutely intrinsic part of this conversation. So how do we know? So I would have sat here 10 years ago and I'd have been wringing my hands. I'd have been wringing my, oh dear. Oh, and my kids are fine. They didn't play outdoors unsupervised or spontaneously anywhere near as much as I did. I thought we were storing up all manner of problems for the future. One of mine's just got back from a festival. She can look after herself. There's no problems on that score. I might have been absolutely beside myself with terror every time her phone signal dropped off my special app to track her. And there's part of the problem right there. There you go. That's what happens. You have these conversations. You stumble across the story. If my parents had a phone app that let them know wherever I was, I mean, that would have been just bizarre. And yet for us, it's quite normal. So I suppose you need a question, don't you? Well, I hope you don't. If you want to just get stuck in straight away, you know what the theme of this conversation is. The number you need is 03456060973. So we'll do the conversation we would have had when my children were still in this catchment area. And that would be, are we doing them harm? Do you worry that your anxiety is harming your child? 03456060973. But now I'm older, most certainly not wiser. Does it do damage? Is it true? I mean, what would you point at as proof that a lack of spontaneous, unsupervised play has had a detrimental effect on a generation, because we're now living in there's enough that have come up through the helicopter parenting period for them now to be. So hand on heart, you've got a child in their teens, their late teens, early 20s. Hand on heart, can you see evidence that the anxious parenting that our generation undertook, the terror of stranger danger, the fear of cars, the fear, can you see the consequences of it? Because I'm not sure I can. I tend not to talk too specifically about mine since they started secondary school, because it wouldn't be fair. But you know, have that insight into what, I mean, because we were certain of it a few years ago, absolutely certain it was going to happen, and we were doing our children a grave disservice, but we just couldn't help it. We'd have phone-ins about, I know, I wish I could, but I can't. I mean, you know, I know it's 1 in a million. This is me talking, not you, by the way. It's 1 in a million, but what if you were? What if you were the 1 in a million? The poor Madeleine McCann story, that I think had a great impact on us as generations, possibly. But do we know? Does anybody know whether it actually does have a detrimental effect at all? Can you honestly, with great love and concern, look at your 19-year-old? I mean, maybe festivals are quite a good example. First time they sort of go away unsupervised, spontaneously with their mates in a tent, and they've done all right. Or have they not done all right? Are they too frightened? Possibly. What is the thing you think, the thing about your beloved little boy or girl, as they now approach proper adulthood? What's the thing you think that is a consequence, the thing you regret, a regrettable consequence of what we would call helicopter parenting? And I mean, you know, I'm always fascinated by change, transformation. Did you break the habit? Did you manage to break the habit? What did you do to ensure that your children's childhood would be a little bit more like yours than their generation's normal experience? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Because I'm not like reverse engineering or something like that, but I'm just wondering whether we fell into one of our own traps on this and just presumed that because things were different, they must be worse. There you go. That's the definition of my dayitis that we've been groping towards since about 10 o'clock this morning. Things are different, therefore they must be worse. I don't want to be that person. So we can acknowledge now things are very, very different, have been for some time. Can we be confident that they're actually worse? That the lack of unsupervised or spontaneous play has had how would we know? How are we going to measure it? Oh, well, I'll tell you how. We're just going to ask each other. What do you reckon? Because I'm not sure it has, you know. 0345 6060 973. It's 20 minutes after 12. Where are we going with helicopter parenting? What do you reckon? Did we beat ourselves up unduly 10, 15 years ago for not letting the kid play outdoors? We're close to, it didn't do me any harm. Anyone who says it didn't do me any harm, almost certainly it did. And the whole point of the harm that it did you is it's rendered you incapable of noticing the harm that was done. But enough from me. What about you? Shai's in Greenwich. Shai, what would you like to say?
Hi, I'm extremely excited about speaking to you firstly.
Oh, Lord. But, now I feel I'm responsible for the enormous anticlimax that you're about to experience.
I think we're probably around the same age and probably had the same experience in terms of growing up. So I was a feral child. I talk to my kids about it all the time. Out in the morning, back for when Monkey Magic used to come on. Yes. I don't think our parents knew whether we were hurt.
Kandara, they said it was in India. I used to love that program.
Cutting your knee. I don't remember going home crying for a cut knee. No. Wipe it off. Carry on playing. I don't remember eating lunch properly. But with my kids, I can't let them out of my sight. I'm absolutely petrified. I have the 360 app.
How old are they? 24, 25.
14, 10 and 5.
Okay.
And I'm always questioning whether I am too much, whether it's going to have a negative impact on them. I don't know.
I don't think necessarily, but the psychologists say it, though. I don't know what you'd point at. I wonder when yours is 18, you'd point at and say, oh, well, I think that's probably because they never had any responsibility. Because you say feral, I say responsibility. You were trusted with your own destiny almost.
So what I've tried to do now, and very reluctantly, is let him do a few things. The thing is, I didn't grow up in London.
No, that's relevant, I think.
Now I live in London. London still sounds a little scary to me.
Yeah, okay.
So so little things like letting him go to the bus, go to taekwondo by himself on the bus while I'm 360 checking him. I'm doing little things where I'm giving him more responsibility, but I'm dying at home.
I think. How often do you check?
360.
Yeah.
It's on the whole time. I mean, he went on a school trip to Brussels. I think I had the phone with me.
But if he loses his phone, you're going to have a heart attack.
And I am.
'Cause it's not him. You've not got him tagged. It's just a phone that you're following around Northern Europe.
No, and it's caused me to have high blood pressure. So
Yes,
I stress about
you
them
really
all
do,
the
don't you?
time.
Well, that's a little extraordinary, isn't it? When you compare yourself, that was quite diplomatic of me. When you compare yourself to your peer group, are you above the average on this?
I am.
Anxiety?
I'm too much.
You sound it.
I am too much.
Yeah.
I am too much. But then the only reason is when I think about my childhood, and I think about all the things that could have happened.
Yes.
How in the world did we survive?
That is a question. But then again, the counterpoint would be, but we did. You did survive. So the risks were not as great as you are building them up to be in retrospect.
Skateboarding on main roads.
Yeah.
Cycling on no helmet.
Climbing scaffolding.
Scaffolding.
Yeah.
Yes.
That wasn't normal behaviour. Well, I mean, do you think when you compare your 14-year-old to his mates, are you because you're going to get some pushback soon, aren't you? When he's not allowed to do things that they are.
Some of them are similar, which is nice.
Yeah.
Others are a lot more lax. You know, they're going into London on the tube by themselves, which just the thought of that.
Does it? Because I met my godson at the zoo the other day, and I thought he'd want to go and see the Transformers movie, but all he wanted to do was go and look at the snide gear at the Camden market shots. So we went to Camden and bumped into something 13, I think. They'd had a school trip at the zoo, and that was it. They were just let go from the school gates and make their own way home.
Oh my world!
But
really?
I thought I didn't even balk at that. It didn't even cross my mind. And then I was very touched that he wanted to stay with me and not go off with his mates, because I told him that he could if he wanted to. But they were just knocking around Camden, which is, a very colourful part of town.
I lived in Camden. I wouldn't let my.
But you wouldn't let your 14-year-old go
Camden.
off stroll. You should have seen my boy. You should have seen my godson haggling for a new jacket. He made me. I should have got him involved in the purchase of my last house. I should have sent him into the estate agents. He was amazing. He's amazing.
What is that fine balance? What is the balance of letting them be independent enough and to protect them? Because if I think about it, my sole job is to keep them protected.
Yeah.
So.
But you are close to cotton wool then, aren't you? By your own analysis, you're closer to cotton wool than you could be. And
I am. Yeah.
Well, there's the question. I mean, the thesis there this hour is that it possibly doesn't do the harm that we fear it, that you still fear it would and will. And I used to think it might, but I don't know, boys and girls are probably different as well. Shai, thank you. 25 minutes after 12 is the time. Jack's in Edgware. Jack, what would you like to say?
Hi James, how you doing?
Pretty good, mate. What's on your mind?
So I'm 24, and my little brother, he's 7 years younger than me, and I really do think that it has had an effect, because I was allowed to go play outside. I live with my parents at the moment. We lived in a cul-de-sac in Edgware.
Okay.
And I used to have loads of friends. We used to go play out in the summers. We used to sit face forward on our skateboards and try and hit each other with bricks as we're racing down the hill, that sort of thing.
Gosh.
And my little brother obviously saw me doing that and kind of assumed that was going to be the case for him as well. And then when he tried to kind of go outside and make friends, there was no one he could make friends with. There were plenty of kids who were his age.
The siblings of you, your mates in some cases. But you're quite young to have had that experience. So Xboxes were in their pomp when you were in your early teens.
I mean, I'm a big gamer myself, but
you could do both.
I still preferred to go outside with my friends, and then when it was time, when the street lights came off, we all just got onto the Xboxes.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
And I think what the effect has had is that I've got plenty of hobbies and I've got lots of interests, but he does not have any hobbies, any interests whatsoever. His only real interest is in maybe buying fashionable clothes that he sees on Instagram and stuff like that.
Oh.
And I think I think what that psychological study is saying, I think it's bang on. And I don't really know what I'm going to be like as a father, but the way I see it, I'm going to let them do whatever they want, because that's how we're supposed to evolve and live, and it's survival of the fittest at the end of the day, isn't it? And
well, up to a point, Lord Copper. I don't quite get it. I think you're right, and I'm not disputing your analysis, but so the hobbies are about interacting with what we call the real world, aren't they? Actually, right? But
I guess so. Yeah.
But he could easily have come. He could have been playing. Forgive me for sounding a bit decrepit, but he could have been playing chess online, couldn't he? Or swapping notes with his mate of mine. He's become good friends with his video game comrades to the point where they meet up. They meet up in northern cities in real life.
See, it's
so your brother. Well, it is for him. So your brother might just. It might be a him problem rather than a society problem. Is what I'm cautiously suggesting, Jack, without wanting to offend.
What it is when he was outside trying to look for friends, like he would be outside on his scooter, and there would be kids his age like shouting at him from the window, but they wouldn't be allowed out.
So the parents were the problem or the obstacle.
It is the parents, because at the end of the day, we live on a cul-de-sac. Like not much actually goes on here.
Not going to get much safer in an urban environment,
you would have seen me and my friends and the kids who were just a year or two younger than us. They would have seen us all out playing and doing whatsoever. I don't know what happened within those 7 years, but something happened.
That's fascinating, isn't it? That time scale. Yeah. I wonder what did happen within that 7 years. He's 17 now, is he?
He would be 17 now, yeah.
So he was. So it's not lockdown then, because you'd be about 10, 11, 12 when you were looking to start playing in the street.
Exactly. And then he would go on his own into London, because none of his friends' parents would allow them to go out with him.
Right.
So a lot of the time he's spent out in the world as being on his own, and that's.
And he's turned in on himself, and that's why his pastimes are not what you'd call rich. In terms of experience. That's sad, actually. Well, at least he's got you looking out for him. I suppose it could be worse, but maybe that is a better perspective than a parent, because you can be a little bit more objective as a sibling. As a parent, the invitation to ring me and tell me that your child is a bit, socially awkward or uncomfortable, or that things aren't going, it feels disloyal. A sibling's concern comes from a different place, actually. I think possibly less rose-tinted, mate. I don't know. I'm just gibbering. But I hope it's entertaining gibber. Amelia, it's 1-1 now in the football, I can tell you. If you are 2-1 to who? I beg your pardon, 2-1 to... This is why I'm not doing sports. It's 12:30. Amelia Cox has got your headlines. It's 12:32. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we are wondering how we're going to know for sure that so-called helicopter parenting, excess anxiety, and the consequential restrictions on children playing are going to have negative effects on our children. It feels that they will, right? I thought Jack was powerful on this. His brother not got the sort of rich tapestry of interests that he would have had if he'd spent a little bit more time out in the real world with other people, as opposed to, through no fault of his own in his case, as opposed to being confined to a solitary or online existence. But, of course, part of the reason why his existence was solitary was because the parents of his friends wouldn't let them out. 93... Jamie Bulger, I think, a few of you suggesting here's one. I wonder if the James Bulger case in 1993 was the turning point for fear and safety concerns. Well, it might have been for our generations, but it wouldn't be for now, would it? It's that horrible, that haunting video footage. It must have reached parts that no other previous abduction had reached, and then subsequently discovering what had happened. Utterly horrifying. But it wouldn't change... So, then technology comes along, technology accelerates after that. It's just, I don't know. I think it must have been detrimental, but I can't point at the proof that it was. Increase in mental health issues. That will have something to do with diagnosis, but not everything. Joe's in Woking. Joe, what made you pick up the phone?
Oh, hi there, James.
Hello.
Yeah, I've got 4 kids of my own, ranging from 11 down to 5. Yeah. Me and my wife have differing levels of acceptability of how far we're willing to let them go and how much freedom we'll let them to have outside.
Okay.
How
differing?
She's a lot more helicoptery than me.
Yeah.
got to be honest. I want them to play outside the front. We live in quite a secure area because I'm in the military, so we live on a military patch. So outside the front, we've got a park. The other kids play, and we are one of those families that she wants to bring the kids in all the time. If they're outside, I'm outside.
Really?
So I find myself a lot of time outside watching the children. Which is not.
To keep her happy, to keep your wife happy, you're outside watching the children.
And so that they can play outside, because I think it's so important that they do go outside and play.
What is she frightened of happening, if that's not a silly question?
Them being hurt, them being taken. I don't know. You can't quite put your finger on it. Other people, I think, is what she's frightened of.
And that communicates to children, doesn't it? To teaching them to be frightened of other people, which some people listening will say, well, good, and other people listening will say, that's not good. It's a weird... Yeah. There it is. There's the split in a nutshell.
I also think, COVID definitely had an impact, because if you look at my 5-year-old and my 11-year-old,
yes,
when you see my 5-year-old, who obviously was growing up through that, if somebody comes along, she stands back from that individual.
Right.
And she's like, can I speak to that person? She's not as willing as the other ones just to go up and speak to anybody.
Okay.
Because when you see somebody, don't go near them. Don't go near them.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, of course. Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. God, there's a lot, isn't there?
You can see that. But I was saying to your researcher as well, I think...
Producer, Joe.
Sorry, producer, sorry.
Right.
I apologise.
It's all right.
Yeah, I was saying that I think also class might have something to do with it as well, because you've got no options. Like I live in the military quarter. My house is very small. My garden's very small. We live in Surrey. We're not that, but it's super affluent. So for my kids to have space, they have to be outside to run around and play. Yeah. Whereas I've got a friend who's a neurosurgeon, and he's, her husband's a pilot, and they live in a big £1 million house. Lovely people, don't begrudge them a bit.
No,
but they've got a huge back garden, so their outside is just in the back garden. So their kids can play outside by going outside in the back garden.
Yes. Yeah, there's going to be an element of that. But also, safety as well, isn't it? You've got, I think if you lived in the middle of the New Forest, you'd probably be a little bit more relaxed about it than you would be if there were loads of houses back. Well, I don't know, actually. Your wife probably wouldn't be. Do you argue?
No, she wouldn't.
Do you argue, or is it you?
Very occasionally, when we've got something to do inside and they want to play outside, and we've both got our jobs to do,
yes.
Look after the house, etc. And I want to come in and do my bit of housework or whatever it is I've got to do. I'll just forego that and go outside so I can watch the kids.
And they could keep an eye on each other, couldn't they, at least? Or there's other kids out there. And there's other kids out there with no parents watching as well. So another little distinction creeps into their consciousness, doesn't it?
Exactly. The other thing is as well, I think there's a sense of community is something that's brought into this. I mean, we live on a patch, and in the in the old days when I grew up, we knew everybody. You just go and knock on somebody else's house if there's a problem, or another parent would be outside that you would just go to, and you knew everybody in the street. But people don't seem to do that anymore. It's very insular.
Yes,
so nobody.
That's cars as
out.
much as anything. Well, you're younger than me, so it may not be cars, but for me, it was cars. It was so we'd walk to school and back when I was very young, which meant Mum knew everybody else walking to school and back. You get conversation. Some of our best friends would be from that period. There's a lot going on. Joe, why do you think the producer brought interior decorating into this conversation?
I think that was to do with watching and being able to see your children. And
I'm not aware of this, so you're closer to it. So she's obsessed with that program where they put a virtual reality headset on people to show them what their house could look like. Have you seen it? I haven't seen it.
I have not seen it. I was saying so. I've not seen it. I don't watch a lot of telly,
she thinks that people are knocking down walls so they can keep an eye on the kids when they're cooking and stuff like that. Have you come across? Is this something you're familiar with?
It is. Yeah, it's about. I can't see them. It is something my wife would say, and I say, well, what about when they're upstairs playing in their bedroom?
Yes.
I can't see them then. You can't see them all night while you're asleep. They could go and get keys. She's 11. She could let herself out.
Yes. But you can't. Well, when I can, it's a weird one. I've never even thought of that. And apparently, every family that's on the show is saying we need to knock that wall down so we can see them when we put walls back up. Actually, we went knocked down had a massive open plan ground floor, and then got really annoyed about the fact that you could watching telly or something like that. We ended up putting walls back up. Thank you, Joe. It's 12:39. Liz is in Evenley. Is it Evenley?
Yeah, Evenley. That's right. Yeah.
In Northampton.
Yeah, near Brackley.
Yeah, okay. I was in Brackley to witness.
I know.
Were you there?
I wasn't there.
No, unlucky though, eh? Still in the National League North, is it, for Brackley Town?
Oh, I don't know.
It's a shame. Carry on, Liz.
Yeah, so I was born in Leeds in the 70s. So I lived through the Yorkshire River.
Yeah. Yes.
So I remember that quite vividly. The sort of not paranoia, because it wasn't paranoia, but
sure.
Being aware of that. So my dad had always really instilled into me that if someone said scream, or don't scream or I'll kill you or something, scream anyway.
Yeah.
There's the chance, So
of course.
So really weirdly, I was really aware of that. But I was allowed to play out all the time, like everywhere. I mean, whether it was outside my front house in Leeds or in the Yorkshire Dales, we had a caravan, luckily, on a static site, and was able to just roam really freely on my own most of the time.
Same.
But when was at home, I had loads of friends and we played outside. So anyway, as an adult, we moved down south.
Right.
And to Brackley, and that's when I had my children. And I really wanted the childhood I had for them. And I never mentioned this to your producer, but I've got a disability, so I had a progressive muscular dystrophy, so I'm now in a wheelchair.
Right.
So that kind of really polarised my mind on this, that I really want my children to do stuff.
Of course.
Because you never know.
That's a powerful point, isn't it?
So we moved out to Evenley, which is literally, walking distance from Brackley. And I thought that the village life would be perfect. The kids would be out in the street, or wander off around the fields and go down the river and stuff like that. And it just never happened because all the kids went to different schools.
So they didn't have that initial connection?
No, so you wouldn't get to catch the bus together, or different year groups did,
Right,
So there would be other kids in the village that did go to the same school, but, other children go to different paid-for schools. They've got after-school activities. And the only thing that really sort of worked out for us was the local cricket club, where all the children eventually sort of did go
congregated. That's nice. Not spontaneous, though, is it? I mean, it's better than nothing.
That's the thing,
but that sense of the world being your lobster, just not.
Yeah, so they did end up on computer games and stuff.
Yeah. Do you notice do we notice it? How old's your oldest now?
He's 18.
Good, that's perfect. So
Boardmasters.
I had one there as well.
Yeah.
Flipping out. That's a long stretch, that one. Is it 4 nights, I think they were there, or 5?
He went Thursday, I think, yeah.
What do you think? So he got on all right? He's not got social...
Well, he went last year as well. He went at 17 last year. Someone else drove him last year.
But there was so we can't look at them now and think, oh, there's the that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, he went to Barcelona the other week as well with his mate. Just organised it. I was not involved in any way. He lost his phone while he was there. That was the only time I was involved, obviously.
Fantastic. I got arrested last time I was in Barcelona, but that's a story. That's a story for another day.
I want to hear that story.
That's a story for when you come to Northampton.
I've been listening to you long enough so that some of your stories are starting to, come round again.
Yeah, be polite. Come round again. You mean like greatest hits? You don't say that to Neil Diamond when he starts singing Sweet Caroline, do you?
So what was it like?
Well, yeah, all right. Well, I'm at the Northampton Royal on November the 5th with the new book list, so you can come there.
I know. I just looked. I don't know whether
I'll have a box fresh.
The wheelchair thing.
If it doesn't, then I will move heaven and earth to make sure you can. But you might have a better thing to do. I'm sure there'll be access there. We're quite careful about picking the venues. But you're right. My anecdotes are now aging like fine wines, I think is the phrase you were looking for, Liz. And that there it is again. How do you know? Because if you are worried about one of your kids because they are like Jack's brother, you don't know that it's a consequence of the parenting or the formative. You think it is. There's a reason why we call them formative. Jay's in Milton Keynes. Jay, what do you reckon?
Hey, James, how you doing?
Pretty good, mate. What's on your mind?
Jolly good. Well, similar to Joe in some respects who you had on to your previous caller.
Yeah.
I'm a 50-year-old dad. I'm ex-military. I have a 4-year-old daughter. And my wife is 10 years junior to me and has obviously been raised in a bit of a different generation to myself. And we're already seeing the challenges between myself and my wife and how our daughter grows up in respect to this question. I think it's almost like it could be a bigger issue, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. You have to be conscious of, and I know you are, and I know Joe is as well, of accommodating anxiety, because it could have roots in other areas. It could be
100%.
Yeah. So, but on the other hand, you've got to be conscious of not passing on anxiety almost to your children, haven't you?
It's really tough. So I was raised in a village in Bedfordshire. I was the youngest of 3 kids.
Wasn't Flitwick, was it?
It wasn't in Flitwick. No, it was in Sandy, Bedfordshire.
Okay.
I was the archetypal stick of the dump. I was never at home. I was always out, and if I did come in, I was covered in all sorts of whatever.
Yeah.
And I loved my childhood, and my wife had quite a held back childhood, and she is still quite socially. She struggles socially in herself, even as an adult.
Sure.
And I think that if you have that difference when you're trying to raise a child, and also reach a compromise between yourselves, and not reflect that back onto the child, it is really difficult.
It is, but you're talking about it, and you're talking about it sensitively and openly, not to me, I mean, but to each other. So that puts you in a powerful position already. But that's the challenge, isn't it? It's almost sort of. At some point, you're going to have to probably prioritise her peace of mind over your
100%
desire, aren't you? Because you love her, and that's the way it goes. But
it's a difficult one as well, because my daughter follows me quite in respect. She's a bit of a daddy's girl.
Yeah.
She loves being outside.
I've got.
She eats snails on a daily basis. That sort of stuff.
She half French, is she?
She's not half French, but she does love a good snail. Yeah, definitely.
I think you'll be fine for the reasons that I've just said, and even being so aware of it so early, and talking about it, and working out the things. And she'll push. The little one will push as well to do things and to have freedoms. But it is weird. It's because you both got a really good point. That's the point that I missed when I was in when mine were that age, was that actually it's not a binary argument. There are reasons to be more cautious than our parents were when we were young, and there are more attractions to staying indoors than there were when we were young. But equally, there is a sort of sense of it being healthier to be out and about a little bit more than a lot of children are these days. Thank you, Jay. Good luck with it. 12:46, 3-1 to England now. 3-1 to England. And don't forget, Australia got a massive home advantage for this match. So that's a very significant result. Almost as if we've hit form at exactly the right time. 12:47 is the time. It is 10-1. All right, that time I was a bit distracted by the football. Could I have got away with that one, Keith, or was the pause noticeable? I don't know. I think it was a tiny little. Well, it was one of those things where there was a touchline. The England player was trying to keep the ball off the Australian player and on the touchline, and they're kind of almost sort of climbing on top of each other. And it's always anyway. I've done pretty well to get to 12:51 without being in any way distracted by what has been going on in Australia, but it's now moved into extra time with England still, with the Lionesses still 3-1 ahead. I thought England were going to be all right. I'm not jinxing it, am I, if I say that now? I thought England were going to be all right when we got hold of the nicknames. How on earth did the Aussies end up letting themselves being called the Matildas? I know it's Waltzing Matilda, but it's not. You're coming up for a game. It's turning up for a pair. Imagine if it was wrestling. And now the Lioness has come into the ring, and you'd go, yay! And that special little thing would be like a little roar, It'd be like, what do you do? What's your little thing? And you go, roar! The Lioness! And in the blue corner, it's Matilda. You go, what? That's not very, I don't know, vigorous. It's not very vigorous. I don't know. I hope I haven't jinxed it. They're doing it again now, going back into the corner, just trying to run down the clock. And who can blame them? Fiona is in Bakewell to steer us back to the game in hand. Fiona, what would you like to say?
Oh, James, thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Very timely call for me.
Yeah.
I'm 57. I have a 15-year-old daughter. I live in rural Derbyshire. And my daughter was year 7 when we had the pandemic.
Yes.
So that kind of formative time, just started secondary school.
Sure. Was it first year secondary school? Saying I got one of those. They had it worse than anyone, I think, personally.
I think so, because and especially she went to a school where she didn't know anybody.
Yeah,
she was
same.
the only one there from her school, etc.
Yeah.
So she's had trouble making friends. Thankfully now she has friends.
Oh, good.
But again, they're in a different town to where we are.
Right.
She is a competitive swimmer, so she has friends there. But again, that's very
Specific.
Right, so
yeah, you can't go and
specific.
ring on the doorbell after tea and go out playing together.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And we realised, she's realised herself that she finds it really hard in situations where she's not been before, where there's lots of people, or where she's got to talk to people she doesn't know,
right,
and be on her own and stuff, that she finds that hard. So, and I'm probably a helicopter parent because I'm older and I worry about
I don't know that your age would come into it, would it, necessarily?
Yeah, I don't. Well, she's an IVF baby as well, so it was a lot to...
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, so of course. Yeah, I do.
All our children are precious. But my solution has been... And yesterday, I took her down. I was brought up in Warwickshire, in a little village, had the childhood where my mum dumped me at a horse yard at 8 o'clock in the morning, picked me up at 6, had no idea what I got up to most of the time.
Lovely.
From the age of 11, most days.
Yeah.
And bless her, my daughter is now in the same village where I was brought up. I dropped her off with my best friend yesterday, who runs a business where the general public are coming in and out, and she's helping and doing stuff and mixing with loads of people, living in the house.
So you're trying to break the shell a bit.
And she realised, she said to me just before I dropped her off, I need to think about, being better with people.
Oh, bless her.
Yes.
Oh, bless her.
She knows that she's quite different, and not different.
No, it's just a skill.
reserved.
It's a gear that she hasn't got into yet, or it's a skill. It's just something that is not quite. But she's aware of it, and she's aware that her life will improve when that improves.
Yes, and I don't think her life's bad.
No,
but
I get
think
it.
She realises
but it will be even better.
Having those social skills to be able to engage with people and be not worried about being away from home and not worried about...
And did you speak to her last night?
Yeah, I did.
How is she?
And we had an absolute laugh. She's fine.
Yeah,
she's having a great time.
And she knows your best friend well. Does she got someone her own age there as well, or is it more of an adult experience for her?
It's a bit of an... There's a lot of adults there, but there's also kids, because it's a business where people are staying. It's like a campsite and stuff.
Oh, and she's sort of half working and staying there.
Yeah.
I think that sounds perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, I keep looking on my phone, thinking, where is she? What's she doing?
Yeah, well, this is a very important period for both mum and daughter, then, mother and daughter.
Yeah, but I think it's something that our children, it's something that my mother wouldn't have even thought about.
Well, she wouldn't have needed to, because you had independence and you knew how to...
Yeah, and I spent more time in A&E than most kids, because I was always falling off a horse or getting crushed or whatever.
Yeah, there's a thing about horses are quite big, actually, and very heavy. This is something that even I understand. So what you've reminded us of is that there's actually there's an elastic band here, isn't there? And there's someone on either end of it.
Yeah, and we have to learn to let them make the mistakes that we were allowed to make, but within an environment that there's someone there to catch them, if we're lucky enough to be able to do that.
Yeah, and you've done it. I think you've done it. That's a really clever thing to have done, especially in this summer holiday before going into the GCSE.
Completely accidental. I'd like to take credit for that, but completely accidental.
Bank it, Fiona. Bank it. Take the credit seriously. I would. There's so little of it around. You grab every morsel that falls spare. And good luck to both of you. Last word on this, I think. Brian's in Glasgow. Brian, what's it going to be?
Yeah, hi there, James. I guess I wanted to push back a little bit on this sort of implication that kids don't get any sort of creative, independent play if their parents are nearby.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to. I've got a 28-year-old, a 25-year-old, and a 4-year-old, right? So I've got a little bit of experience of parenting across a couple of generations, which is fun, right? But you go to any playground or soft play area. Kids pair up and play away, and parents are, making sure they're not getting hurt. But, they still get plenty of opportunities.
Did you do that? How was the oldest? 25?
28.
28. You didn't do that with the 28-year-old?
Sure, yeah. I took them to the park and they went off and played on their own.
Yeah, but you couldn't see them. But you couldn't see soft play. You can see. I think that thing. Do you remember the thing that I just said about knocking down walls? So you can. That's changed between 28 and 8. I think.
For sure, right? But like, there's plenty of occasions where you don't have like immediate vision of them, right? So when my older ones, when they were younger, they'd have many friends around, and they'd be playing in the garden or close by to the house. That's fine. I don't see exactly what they're doing, but they don't get to go down the glen like I did when I was a kid.
You're right. There's gradations, isn't there? I think the thing that probably you wouldn't push back against with a couple of callers talking about how they wanted, or their wives wanted, to see the children all the time, and this program that Eleanor's obsessed with the VR headsets, and parents actually saying, I think we should knock that wall down so we can see the children while we're cooking. I always thought there's a difference with boys and girls. If girls playing in the room where you couldn't see them and you heard a loud noise, you'd worry. And if you had boys playing in a room where you couldn't see them and you heard silence, you'd worry. As if it was boys banging each other around the place and girls quietly get. I'm not being stereotyping, that was just the experience, but the idea that you'd knock a wall down to see them, that's something I think we'd both agree, Brian, sounds a little excessive. And that's it, actually. I managed to present a radio show there while watching a football match, which is a fun. Do you know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow? I'm going to be presenting a radio show while signing pages of the new book that will then be bound into the first edition, so that shops up and down the country can have signed exclusive first editions. Do you think I'd be able to do that?
Men can multitask. This is important breaking news.
It will be like doodling. So I do quite a lot of doodling while I'm on air. So I have a big pile. I've got to do about 2,000 of them.
Well, listen, if we're breaking the rules for a bit, because it's so exciting that the England team has got into a World Cup final. Yes. I have just been, for the last 15 minutes, breaking down my producer to allow me. Do a phone-in on this win.
And did you prevail?
I think I've prevailed. Well, we'll know if any calls come in.
There's a reason to stay tuned. If you missed any of my show today, as you are on tenterhooks to discover who has won the battle of the balls, we will. You can listen on catch up by downloading Global Player, Rewind Live Radio, all the latest podcasts, and
shenanigans,
clips, all of that. Anyway, Tom Sawbrick will be with you at 4. Sheila Fogarty's with you now. 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 Sheila Fogarty's